Okay, so I'm Unseen Warfare, and we're back today, and I'm doing an episode on the Lawlessness will abound. So Lawlessness will abound. That's the name of the episode. What it's gonna really deal with is all these people coming out after the Kirk assassination, talking about, that we need to save America and, and all this stuff. Well, I really was thinking about this, and what does that mean? Save America. Um, their culture, their race, or something like that, or they're conservative. Being a conservative, is that what saving America means? And I was thinking, well, how are these people going to save anything if they're not even a part of the church? You know, they're in world orthodoxy. They're under heretics. So how are they going to save anything if they're so deluded they can't discern that they're following people that are going to lead them into the church's condemnation? How are they going to save anything? And I think the answer to that question I kind of ask myself is that they're not going to save anything. If anything, they're going to push further into the satanic forces that are pushing things in our world and give in to more absurdism. And in the very same spirit that led to the assassination, the lawlessness and the fighting amongst left and right is what caused that assassination. And that same spirit, that demonic spirit, this zeitgeist, antichrist spirit of the age, wants people to give in to the passions and hate each other and pit each other against each other. And it's like, I'm not calling for pacifism, is that because these guys will say, well, you're a coward or something. But, well, I don't think so. I don't think that's the case. I think the reality of it is that if we're not doing something righteous, if we're not aligned with God, and we're not blessed by God for whatever action we're taking, then it's, what are we doing? He's not going to bless you just because someone did some evil act that you're taking out of context to justify your own evil act. Do you think that'll be blessed? And the answer to that is no. And then, I'm seeing this like sort of false dialectic where we're hearing sort of white nationalist Nazi talking points. Well, if we look into the history of this, the same people that sent, Hitler to Germany established Lenin in his spot. So the reality is we're looking at false dialectics, critical race theory. These are plans. I don't know any other way to put it. It's just plans to divide and conquer. So, wow, I don't know if that was. Yeah, it's by design, and it's unfortunate, truthfully. So I wanted to go to this text. It's called "The Nations, Nationalism, and the Russian Idea." So, one second, I'm going to see if uh, someone wants to come on and be a guest. If they want to, they want to. If they don't, they don't. All right. So the text I'm going to is "The Nations, Nationalism, and the Russian Idea." It's by Vladimir Moss, and what he has to say is this: the love of one's country is one of those forces in human nature which can be used for good or for evil, for the love of God and the building up of His kingdom, or for the hatred of one's neighbor and the destruction of mankind. In a sermon delivered in the revolutionary year of 1905, St. John of Kronstadt said, quote, "The earthly fatherland, which with its church is the threshold of the heavenly fatherland. Therefore love it fervently, and be ready to lay down your life for it so as to inherit eternal life there." Nearly 40 years later, however, some Catholic Croat murderers of Orthodox Serbs, when told by a Catholic that they would go to hell for their actions, replied, quote, "All right, so long as the Serbs will go there also." Such is the power of national hatred that it can willingly barter eternal life for the grim satisfaction of destroying one's national enemy. By the end of the 20th century, it looked as if national hatred had replaced ideological hatred as the major passion tearing mankind apart. Whether in the former Yugoslavia or the former Soviet Union, in Somalia or Rwanda or East Timor, it was wars between tribes, nationalist wars that were making rivers of blood flow and the causing of, quote, the international community to despair, and the international organization seemed powerless to stop them. Characteristic was the mark of Jacques Delors, president of the European Commission and one of the leading internationalists of the time. He says, quote, I've lived through two humiliating moments in my life. The first was when I was 15 and the Germans invaded France. I saw the population fleeing before the enemy, including soldiers on bicycles whose only thought was to save their own skin. I swore then that such a thing must never happen again. But the same thing is happening again today in Bosnia. I'm ashamed and dishonored. Soon I will turn 69. One day I will die, and I will have done nothing to stop all that. However, instead of wringing our hands, we should take sober note why it is that in an age of unparalleled international cooperation and corporation and gigantic efforts to overcome national antagonisms. The age of League of Nations and the United Nations of the Soviet Union and the European Union, everything seemed to be falling apart, and nationalism in its evil mode was as virulent as ever. It is obvious that the worldview on which these grand schemes were based was false, that had not penetrated to the mystery of the nation and the nature of nationalism. Their intentions may have been good in some cases, but the experience of the 20th century showed, and the experience of the first 2 decades of the 20th century has not disproved the contention that such good intention only leads to hell, hell on earth, and hell in the life to come. Democracy and nationalism. Okay, so here we go. One of the major lessons to be drawn from the collapse of the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia is that nationalism is a force that cannot be indefinitely suppressed nor made to wither away. Leaders who ignore it usually end up being swept away by it. Moreover, this is a lesson for democratic leaders no less than for communist dictators, for simply providing every citizen of a multinational state with a vote and a certain human rights does not remove the potential for ethnic conflict. Only very few democratic states have successfully solved the problem of nationalism. The exception, like Switzerland, are better described as confederations of relatively homogeneous territorial nation states. As Michael Lynn points out, even such highly civilized democracies as Canada and Belgium are threatened with disintegration by nationalistic demands for self-determination, while the United States, Russia, and China all have serious ethnic problems. On the other hand, a strict application of the principles of national self-determination will not solve the problem. It is not simply that the oppressed minority in the larger unportioned state often becomes the oppressing majority in the smaller portion state, or that many nations, once independent, are too small to be economically viable, or that some ethnically homogeneous nations are completely surrounded by larger nations, so as Tatarstan or something is surrounded by Russia. Perhaps the strongest argument against self-determination is that ethnic populations in most modern states are so mixed up that the attempt to separate them is partially impossible or is necessary, accompanied by enormous hardships and even wars. Thus, the idea of creating an ethnically homogeneous state for the Kurds is opposed by the states in the region, while the idea of partitioning, say, Latvia between the Latvians and the Russians is extremely problematic. Like sexuality and individual psychology, nationalism is social psychology, must be contained without being suppressed, recognized without being incited or pandered to, and again, like sexuality, nationalism must be recognized as a force that is vital for the perpetuation of the race. Thus, Anne Applebaum writes, quote, Western diplomats should be interested in the Central European right and in healthy nationalistic movements elsewhere in Eastern Europe. Not all, quote, nationalism or patriotic emotion is necessarily a symptom of anti-democratic tendencies, nor is it all extraneous to the process of reform. The quality of the civil servant diplomats and the soldiers in Central Europe, for example, would depend highly on whether Central European politicians manage to revive national pride, given that salaries to the public sector remain low. One of the few emotions that can keep a good Slavic scientist in Slovakia or a talented Ukrainian entrepreneur in Ukraine is patriotism. End quote. We could do with more enlightened patriotism, for it is the excess of benighted nationalism that is the real worry in international politics today. Nationalism should be purified and sublimated, not only to the level of enlightened patriotism, but to a higher supranational level, which will allow the expression of national feelings without leading to international conflicts. The question is how. Historically speaking, the only force apart from a force of arms that has been capable of holding different nations together in one state for long periods of time has been religion. The Latin root of the word, quote, religion means, quote, binding together, and there can be no doubt that universalist religions such as Confucianism in China, or Islam in the Middle East, or Orthodox Christianity in Eastern Europe have had a measure of success in binding together multinational empires. Of course, religion can also divide, but it is important to understand the difference between religious and nationalistic conflicts. Religious and ideological conflicts are in general conflicts about truth and falsehood, right and wrong. As such, they are at least theoretically capable of resolution by rational means, by discussion and argument, by conversion of one side to the opinion of the other. The nationalist conflict, on the other hand, are based on emotional ties and sympathies which are much more difficult to change. Of course, points of fact of morality or morality are often hotly debated in nationalist conflicts. The justice of this or that change of the boundaries, for example, or the agent of this or that murder, or bombings, or okay. So what he says is the justice of this or that change, or boundaries, for example, or the agent of this or that murder or bombing. But it is characteristic of nationalist conflicts that even when the facts are clear, the antagonists still cannot come to an agreement because the cause of the conflict actually has very little to do with the truth or justice, but rather with the simple fact that two nations hate each other, or at any rate feel the other nation to be so different, so strange, that real cooperation is considered impossible. And I think we're seeing this also on a smaller level where you're having like these false dialectic sort of things going on, where it's like someone picks their political party and says, "Oh, like I'm on the right," and this other person says, "I'm on the left." So whatever the right says, I hate. So when you see some, and then the right will take a event that they see they can use as like political, emotional blackmail or something on the left, and then vice versa, and it's this constant conflict that's going on with no solution ever. There's never going to be a solution because those that are causing the divide, or at least like perpetuating it to the media, are benefiting off of the conflict. You know, the, like who's really benefiting off those types of conflicts, and in the end, all it leads to is our nation being more divided, more absurdist, more satanic. There's no soundness, there's no moderation, there's no checking the facts, there's no seeing if the other side really did this thing or didn't. There's a jumping almost on any event to blame the other side, that, oh, you did this, so now we're going to rally the troops and call for murders, or call for the death penalty, or call for whatever absurd thing that can, feed our own misery as a country. It's sick. It's sick, and it's a spiritual sickness at its root. And it's dealing with the fact that people aren't going to church, and they're not confessing, and they're not being held accountable for their actions, in life. So they're anonymous. They're out here in the internet land pushing some weird, uh, neo-Nazi movement and calling themselves Orthodox or something, and acting as if they're against Zionism when that actually supports Zionism, because it gives the Zionists something to justify themselves with. It's like, yeah, we're the victims now. We're the victims now because you took an extreme position, and that's the position they want you to have. Not a moderate position that says, okay, here's the issues, and this is why that's wrong, and this is what we need to do about that. You get nowhere with these sort of false dialectics. The tragedy is that most cases religious conflicts have become mixed up with nationalist ones, um, in a manner that is very difficult to disentangle. Sometimes this is the fault of the religion, in that it consists of little more than intellectual underpinnings and nationalist prejudices. All religions that believe in a super race are of this kind. Again, many pagan religions serve the purpose of exalting a particular territory in the minds of its inhabitants, assuring them that this territory is the object of particular favor by them, if not all the gods. Hence the ancient cults of Athens, or the Athenians, or Diana of the Ephesians, or the Jerusalem in contemporary Judaism. But even universalist religions tend to become associated with those nations or regions that first embrace them, or embrace them most ardently. Thus, although Orthodox Christianity is a faith in which, quote, there is neither Greek nor Jew, it came to be called the, quote, Greek faith because the great importance of the Byzantine Empire as the cradle of Orthodox civilization. Later, however, when the center of power in the Orthodox world shifted northwards, the peasants of the Russian Empire tended to use the words Russian and Orthodox as synonyms, so that, for example, Christ was the Russian God, and the apostles were Russian, although the peasants certainly understood that they were ethnically Jews, while a Russian who fell away from orthodoxy would cease to be Russian, and might as well, if he became a Marxist, be classified as a Jew. These changes in linguistic practice are not necessarily evidence of the degradation of a universalist religion into nationalism. In many cases, they are rather an utmost inevitable consequence of the fact that universalist regions acquire particular national incarnations and become particularly associated with those incarnations. Conversely, national identity and character are very profoundly affected by the religion or ideology which the nation adopts. Indeed, Solzhenitsyn and others have argued that religious ideology and cultural criteria or national identity are much more important than purely genetic ones, and this idea, which would have seemed simply common sense in earlier, more religious and less nationalistic times, has much to commend it today. First, very few people in today's world, especially in Europe, have no mixed blood, or can be called genetically, quote, pure. So the idea of classifying people among genetic lines is scientifically useless, even if it were not morally dubious. Secondly, the attempt to look at nations from a purely genetic standpoint means completely to misunderstand the nature of those nations, whose continuing strong identity over the centuries is likely to have been the result of genetic inheritance, but is almost certainly the result of commonly held faith. The Jews, for example, and many national prejudices and potential conflicts could be diffused if the wrath of those who have these prejudices could be diverted from what they see as the offending genetic nation to the offending ideological nation. What would be the consequence of the defining nations primarily in terms of their religious, ideological, and cultural allegiances rather than in terms of their genetic inheritance? First, if accepted on a wide scale, it would help to diffuse nationalistic conflicts between nations that are ideologically and culturally close. It has been pointed out that relations between democratic states are usually harmonious, but the same could be argued with regard to relations between other states that share the other religions or ideologies. Secondly, it should warn us against being too optimistic with regard to the resolution of differences between genetically similar but ideologically disparate states, such as communist Korea and the Democratic Korea, or Catholic Croatia and Orthodox Serbia. Um, Genetic kinship actually appears to increase the depth of the difference in these cases, as if the fact that a man of a different ideological nation is related to one by blood makes his crime blacker or more unforgivable. A lessening of ideological intensity, as in Western Europe after the wars of religion, or the imposition of a third ideology upon the other two, as when communism was imposed upon Croatian Catholicism and Serbian Orthodoxy, may help to control the conflict temporarily, but no permanent cessation of the hostilities can be envisaged until the different genetic nations become one nation religiously or ideologically. Moreover, the nations must become ideologically one, not by imposition, but by genuine conversion. Thirdly, the definition of nations in terms of their ideologies rather than their genetic inheritance should focus our attention primarily on the vital task of finding the best ideology and defending it by all the intellectual and spiritual means at our disposal. The West forms a single ideological nation. Its ideology brings the belief it has as a remarkable success in recent years, but its failures are also becoming more glaring and obvious in the eyes of those who hold different ideologies, such as Islam. We have mentioned one of its weaknesses, its failure to control nationalism. Another weakness is the moral corruption of its leaders and the lack of respect in which they are held in most democratic, not to mention non-democratic countries. A third is its failure to provide any higher or deeper spiritual goals for its citizens than the provision of material goods um, on a fairly egalitarian basis. Egalitarian basis. If democracy is the best ideology, then it must be the primary task of Democrats to defend their ideology against these attacks and to show that these weaknesses are unreal or real, but uh, corrigible within the democratic framework. But in spite of the huge prestige gained by their victory over communism in 1989 through 91, they have singularly failed in that task. Perhaps the gravest weakness of democracy and the root cause why it seems to have failed in relation to the strongest nationalisms and non democratic religions is that it tends to underestimate the importance of ideology. Indeed, democracy may be defined as the ideology that ideology does not ultimately matter, but only the will of the majority. However, radically that will may change over time. This democracy does not claim for itself that it embodies the ultimate truth about God, man, the universe. It only says that if the citizen of a state having differing views about God, man, and the universe, and about how their different views should be embodied in the law, they should simply vote on it and accept the will of the majority. Of course, it is part of the democratic ideology that the will of the minority should be, quote, respected, but in practice it is not, especially in recent times. It is a paradox of contemporary liberal democracy that while preaching the maximum of, quote, freedom, it is often extremely intolerant of those who do not believe in their, quote, freedom, for example, in sexual matters. In any case, it is obvious that the question of truth cannot be decided by a vote, nor if the matter is important, and the ethnic religious minority, strong-willed, with a majority vote, ever settle the matter for the minorities. For why should what they see to be the will of God, or of the nation as expressed by the traditions passed down from all generations, be overthrown by a single vote in the present? For example, Judith Miller writes about two influential leaders of modern Islam. Quote, for both Tarabi and Fadala, the Western notion of democracy is alien. To Islam, rule is a prerogative, not of the people, but of God, who appointed the Prophet, who in turn prescribed the general precepts of governance in God's own words, the Quran for both men and parliamentary majority. However large can nullify God's laws as codified in Islamic law. A similar position is taken by the Orthodox Christian nationalists, for whom democratic majorities have no validity if they involve the breaking up of the historic Orthodox nation or the permitting of the phenomenon such as pornography or abortion or homosexuality, which are contrary to the gospel of Christ. Some Democrats have argued that the only way to eliminate some of the most serious nationalist conflicts is to include both nations in one, quote, supernation, with the important proviso, however, that both nations should have voted for the entrance in the new supernation by lawful elected majorities. Thus, the elimination of the rivalry between France and Germany was seen as the main justification for the creation of the European Union by some of its founders. Whether peace was preserved in Europe or after 1945 more by the EU or by NATO and the American Army is a moot point, but it cannot be denied that at least in the early days, the preservation of the common European market created an important motive for keeping the peace. However, it is dangerous to believe that nationalism as such can be cured by abolishing the nations and merging them into some artificial kind of supernation. The former Soviet Union is a vivid example of this fallacy. The Bolsheviks first tried to use and incite national feeling in order to destroy the multinational empire of Russia. Then they tried to impose their own brand of anti-nationalism on all the nations of the former empire, suppressing the old nationalisms in favor of a new, quote, Soviet patriotism. But the old nationalisms were not destroyed, and once the dead hand of Bolshevism was removed, they emerged in a still more virulent form. Virulent. I don't know. Is everybody done? I lost all my viewers that I had. I had 6. I have 1 now. Cool. Okay. So this is a message people don't want to hear. Obviously, people don't want to hear that, they're giving into their passions and doing it like us versus them mentality or something. That's people want extreme takes. They want to feed their hate and misery, and that's unfortunate. And that. And I'm not talking about pacifism, as in like, oh, just roll over and let the leftists like kick you in the face, or something like. That's not what I'm saying. Protect your immediate family, but don't take whatever you can out of context to start like some weird neo-Nazi protest or something. And the reality of it is, like, if we look at the context of how America was established and how our system was created, it's based on Enlightenment philosophy, like John Hobbes and these type of like weird Masonic guys, it, it, the I don't know. It's like if your culture, right, that you're supposedly upholding is anti-Christian, all right. If the culture is anti-Christian, why are you trying to save that culture necessarily? Shouldn't you be trying to convert the nation to the true faith? And then that would be saving it because people would see their culture as orthodoxy. If our kingdom is heaven and we're not of this world, and our culture is actually killing us and rotting our souls, why is it that we're being told to fight for said culture? or our nation or white nationalism or whatever against the leftists, when I think it's a false dialectic. I think it's two arms of the same bird, really. It's in the direction of Satanism, whether we like it or not. America's sort of a Freemasonic experiment in reality, and it's top down. It's a top down system. The legs are supposedly controlling the head, which is stupid and backwards. Um, uh, but that's a lie anyways. The legs aren't controlling the head, as in people's votes or what we can change it by voting this person. No, you can't. That person is going to take the best deal they can, and they don't care about you. That's the reality of it, and we've all known it for a very long time. And if someone does stand up and say anything, they get shot in their head. Okay, that's what happens to those people. So we're not going to win in worldly terms, but how we can win is if our souls are in the right spot. If our souls are directed towards Christ, if we're going to church, and not just any church that claims to be orthodox, but is, accepting charismation for an ecumenist that thinks the Roman Catholics and the Protestants are on the same faith. So, I mean, what do you want? So let's go here. Most recently, okay, what does this say? It says, why should the Swedes be able to change their mind on the other issue, including wait, all right. The problem with the creation of, quote, super nations like the European Union is that the decision of the member nation to, quote, pool its sovereignty in that of the larger nation is irreversible, which is immediately puts it in a different and far more controversial category than the majority of irreversible, irreversible democratic decisions. Take the decision of Sweden to join the European Union was based on the, quote, yes vote by the narrow majority of the Swedish electorate. What am I doing? Electorate. The poll would be final, whichever way it meant. This is understandable in view of the fact that the legislation affecting entry into the European Union is binding on successive national governments. But is this really democratic? Why should the decision of the electorate in November 1994 be more binding than one at an earlier or later time, especially when the consequences are so important and the imponderable in the long term? Why should the Swedes be able to change their mind on other issues, including the composition of their national government, but not on this one? If the powers of the nation's vetoes continue to be whistled down and Europe turns out to be a bureaucratic monster, passing the legislation which is consistently opposed to the majority of the Swedish elect I can't say that word. Electorate as being counter to the Swedish interests. Why should Sweden not be allowed to pull out? Can national self-determination ever be finally bargained away? Is it not according to the principles of democracy as an irreducible right, like the right to practice one's religion? Most recently, of course, it is the British who have reversed the decision that they made over 40 years ago to join the European Union. The emotional intensity of this debate has revealed that it is not the economic arguments, still less the question whether Britain outside the EU might enter into war with the EU, that are the most important factors here, but the three different types of nationalism. Okay, so he's saying, one, British as expressed by the vote. Uh, wait. Majority of the English people outside London to leave the EU. Okay. Two, the European as expressed by the vote of the great majority of Londoners and the intellectual elite to remain in the EU. So I think older people, if I'm not mistaken, when it comes to England, view themselves as Britain. And then younger people see themselves as Europe. So they like, we're a part of Europe. We're part of the EU, which seems bad. I think that sounds like some New World Order plan, which it probably, I don't really, I'm not that smart. I don't know. I just read things. Okay. Um, European as expressed by the vote of the majority of Londoners and the intellectual elites to remain in the EU, and 3. Scottish as expressed by the majority of Scots to remain in the EU and not in the United Kingdom. This demonstrates two important and apparently conflicting facts. First, that the full union between England and Scotland, which goes back to 1707 and has proved to be one of the most successful unions in the political history, is still fragile. And secondly, that the partial union between Britain and the EU, which goes back only 40 years, has already created a new kind of nationalism, a European nationalism that has seriously undermined the old British one. Two related factors are important in understanding of this phenomenon: the rapid decline of religion in recent years, which undermines belief not only in God but also in tradition, and in the importance of past allegiances and an increase in materialism. The whole of the West, indeed the whole of mankind, has become more individualistic than before, with the result that the old allegiances have dissolved and the new relationships created on the basis of essentiality of money alone, so those with strong economic ties to Europe will vote for Europe. Generally speaking, while sentimental and cultural ties with the old country will count for less with them. Like I said, so those people, like the younger people, I could imagine, they're going to see some more benefit in being like, this connecting with the rest of Europe as this one thing. And I think the more you get into like a modernist, worldly, materialistic thinking, then the more we're going to sort of move towards like a new world order. You know what I mean? It's just the obviously, like, the technocrats and all those type of people, like the Elon Musk of the world, they want a one world system because it would be easier for them, so they don't have to like convert their money like when they pass through different places. And I think that's really the mentality, right? Yes, I'm actually WO in the sense that I am Western Right Orthodox. So I'm not Eastern Orthodox, I'm Western Orthodox. Okay. One thing is clear: democracy alone is not sufficient to bind the nation together if they are both very large and very diverse in language, culture, and religion. There must be something stronger which makes the subnation or individual nations feel like they truly belong to the supernation, which has its own individuality and ideology. In other words, the supernations must be unions in spirit and truth, and not only in budget contributions and ballot boxes. The greatest task of facing the Western nations today is finding of the spirit of truth, and otherwise they will succumb to the combined onslaught of disgruntled ethnic minorities from within and determined religious majorities from without. What do the Holy Scriptures, teach us about nations and nationalism? So this is about to be probably the most important part of the episode. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to drop the link in here, and you're welcome. Anybody's welcome to come up and have a discussion if you want. If you don't want to, cool. Um, so we're going to get to the meat of why I'm here today. Okay, what do the Holy Scriptures teach us about nations and nationalism? Holy Scripture recognizes only two nations or races in the strict sense of the word: the race of fallen mankind, which derives its origins from the first Adam, and the race of redeemed mankind, which derives its origin from the last Adam. Christ, the race of fallen mankind, lost its original unity as a consequence of sin, the sin of paganism in particular, and the building of the Tower of Babel. In order to check the spread of sin, God separated the nations both geographically and linguistically. However, a memory of their original unity was never lost. That they were and are of one blood is asserted by Apostle Paul in his sermons to the Athenians. He says, quote, God made from one blood every nation and men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. Acts 17 and 26. Nationalism contradicts this primordial fact of the original unity of mankind in Adam. Since we are all originally one, no man or race or men is essentially higher or lower than any other. For as the Apostle Paul and Barnabas said to the pagans of Lystra, who wanted to make them gods, quote, we are men with the same nature as you. Acts 14, verse 15, and you can also go to James chapter 5, verse 17. At Pentecost, our original unity was restored by a receiving of the Holy Spirit, which transplanted us, as it were, onto a new root, Christ. For, quote, we hear the word of God, each in our own language, in Christ we are born. Acts 2 and 8. From a physical genetic point of view, there's no difference between two races, but from the spiritual point of view, the difference is enormous. In a word, fallen mankind has lost the Spirit of God, the only true spirit of unity. Genesis, chapter 6, verse 3. Whereas redeemed mankind has been born again of water and spirit. John chapter 3, verse 5. In the race in the race of redeemed mankind, which is the Orthodox Church founded by Christ, national differences become of minor importance. Quote, for there is neither Jew nor Greek, for you are all one in Christ Jesus, or Jesus. Galatians 2 and 3 and 28. The very first church council and the very first doctrinal decision of the church was concerned to abolish any essential distinction between Jews and Gentiles in the New Testament church. That was in Acts 15. At the same time, national differences continue to exist and play a role in the mystery of God's providence. This is particularly emphasized by the Apostle Paul in his words on the relationships between the Jews and the Gentiles. Romans 9 through 11. The Jews, he says, have been cut off from the race of the redeemed mankind, while the Gentiles have been grafted in. However, this position can be reversed, so there is no reason for, quote, anti-Semitism. Do not be haughty, but fear. Romans 11 and 20. Because he says he'll branch those out who like get puffed up about being branched in. Okay, so thus the Christians, both Jews and Gentiles, are a, quote, a chosen race, a holy priesthood, a holy nation, a people who has gained. It's 1 Peter 2 and 9. Indeed, there is an important sense in which Christians are the only true nation, the only nation that will endure forever, for the people of God, and you do not seek after mercy, but now have received mercy. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 10. As the Lord said through the prophet Hosea, quote, I call those who were not my people, and those who did not receive mercy, I shall call a people having received mercy, and it will be in the place where it was said, you are not my people, there they will be called the sons of the living God. Okay, so he says, so Hosea 1 and 9, 2 and 24, Romans 9, 25 through 26. This is a brief summary on the first principles of the Orthodox Church teaching on nations and nationalism. Let us now turn to a more recent definition of nation and how they apply to the contemporary nations. So I hope people are really kind of getting a good idea about this real quick. I'm going to go to something. I'm going to finish this text, but I think I'm going to kind of give further context, I guess, into what I'm really talking about, because I think this distinction needs to be made, because we're seeing a lot, and I'm just going to say it. I think they're Freemasons I think they're like some form of revolutionaries that are trying to cause some revolution in America. I think they're trying to pit with critical race theory groups against each other to divide and conquer for their one world system. I think that's what's happening right now. I think that's why they were rallying people at the Capitol building to infiltrate it, and then got all those people locked up. And it was like it's some weird Masonic plot. And I don't have the skill to like break down every little detail and say like how I know that. Well, for one, like, I'll just give you an example on something. Jay Dyer, okay, and like maybe I get some flack for this, but so what? I don't care. Jay Dyer, clearly was at the rally in DC with Alex Jones and like Nick Fuentes, and Nick Fuentes is known to have rallied the people, and like he's on like a microphone, like kind of rallying people, standing up against the New World Order. Well, anybody who knows anything about Infowars has known for a long time they're controlled opposition, right? Like they try to like get the people all worked up and in a frenzy, and then they're kind of misdirected. um but not only that, but there was the second guy, I forget his name, he's on Twitter, but he came out and admitted that he was a 33rd degree Mason. And if you follow me on Twitter, I'm unseen.warfare, I think that's what my Twitter name is. I'll be posting that today. I have to I have to go through my stuff, but I have that somewhere. Okay, so let's go to that text I was talking about. So this was a council from 1872, the Council of Constantinople. Where is it at? It says, we denounce, censor, and condemn philatelism, to wit, racial discrimination, nationalistic disputes, rivalries, and dissensions in the Church of Christ as antithetical to the teaching of the gospel and the sacred canons of the blessed fathers. Okay, so 1872 Council of Constantinople. Racialism and nationalism are foreign to the tradition of the Orthodox Church. Meanwhile, in America, a group of individuals who have been excommunicated for heresy for violating the 1872 Synod had banded together under the banner of, quote, Orthodox nationalism. But what is nationalism, and how should we as Orthodox Christians regard it? The central point to keep in mind is that discussions of nationalism, regardless of whether it's being praised or attacked, is about more than mere feelings of affection for one's country. As with all isms, nationalism is first and foremost an ideology. And any ideology is usually rooted in what? Idealism. And it's very, seldom that an ideal can match reality. So, in some sense, that's based in like fallen man's uh, you know, conscience in some way. It's like our consciousness is fallen. So how exactly are these ideologies necessarily of God if they're not associated with Christianity or the church or whatever? It is a system of beliefs about how the world should be organized. Nationalism involves two components. First, a definition of what constitutes the quote nation, and second, a belief that this nation is the most important association in guiding decisions about how to organize society and how to act in the social sphere. Sometimes the nation is defined in ethnic terms, as with white nationalism, or it may be defined in terms such as constructed in history. In the United States, for example, nationalist history begins with the first English-speaking colonists who were here before the colonies were a country, but that history excludes other groups present during that same time period. Thus, the Pilgrims are viewed as part of this history, while the Spanish colonization of Florida is not. Other versions define the nation in terms of economic association or even civic associations. Once the nation is defined, nationalism is then the belief that this group of people and the association of them that holds together is central and should be the foundation for any government or political association. This ideology is relatively new. In the past, people did not give their first allegiance to some associated group called the quote nation. Rather, it was to a universal empire, such as in China or Byzantium, to a feudal prince or a chieftain or a city. To wit, the word quote politics itself comes from the Greek police, police. I don't know, something like this. I don't speak Greek, which means city. For the ancient Greeks, therefore, to some extent, for the Byzantines, the city was the fundamental unit of political organization, and no one had yet thought of a nation. Once we realize this, we may begin to see why some in the church have warned against nationalism. By elevating the nation to the basic and most important association, many other associations are relegated to second class status, such as the family, the church, one's local community, or shared humanity. While different definitions of nationalism might include religion, community, or family as constitutive elements. Wow, I tried to say something crazy. For every variety of nationalism, the nation is always more important than these other associations. While nationalism is historically speaking a new ideology, Christians have reflected on questions of political loyalty since the time of Christ. Repeatedly, Christian thinkers have warned against whatever loyalty we make on earth. Everything is secondary to our fulfillment of the gospel commands to love God and our neighbor. Thus, Christians should be suspicious of nationalism, not because Christianity is fundamentally opposed to the idea of nations, but because Christians should be suspicious of all ideologies. Christian commitments always take priority over ideological commitments, no matter how good or noble their basis might be. Thus, the Christian response to nationalism should be neither simple acceptance or simple rejection. The Christian position is not that the nation is fundamental, nor that the religion or family are more fundamental than nation. While Christians can and should engage with society at all levels, including the national, the fundamental allegiance of Christians is to Christ. Right. In his homily on the statue, St. John Chrysostom makes this point when talking about political allegiances. If you are a Christian, he says, no earthly city is yours. Though we may gain possession of the whole world, we are but strangers and sojourners in it all. We are all enrolled in heaven. Our citizenship is there. Let us not, after the manner of little children, despise things that are great, and admire those that are little. Not our city's greatness, but the virtue of our soul is the ornament and defense. If you suppose dignity to belong to a city, think how many persons must partake in this dignity, who are depraved and full of 10,000 evil things, and at last despise such honor. But that city above is not of this kind, for it is impossible that we can be a partaker of it, who has not exhibited every virtue. Chrysostom argues that our citizenship, our fundamental allegiance, and the foundation of our social action are heavenly. We should not be taken in blind admiration for our city, our nation, or our compatriots simply because of our national identity. Our city and our nation have many flaws. God alone is blameless. Chrysostom merely echoes a tradition dating back to the earliest Christians. We can see this most clearly in the important epistle of Matthias to Diogenes, dating from around 130. There, Mathetes, I don't know. It's math, then eat, tis, I don't know, ETES at the end of it. Christians are indistinguishable from other people. I can't talk. Christians are indistinguishable from other people either by nationality, language, or customs. They do not inhabit separate cities of their own, or speak a strange dialect, or follow some outlandish way of life. Unlike some other people, they champion no purely human doctrine. With regard to dress, food, and manner of life in general, they follow the customs of whatever city they happen to be living in, whether it is Greek or foreign. And yet there is something extraordinary about their lives. They live in their own countries as though they were only passing through. They play their full role as citizens, but labor under all the disabilities of aliens. Any country can be their homeland, but for them, their homeland, wherever it may be, is a foreign country. Their days upon the earth, but they are citizens of heaven. Up to the laws, they yet live on a level that transcends the laws. Christians love all people. Early Christians thought of themselves as sojourners, wayfarers, refugees, even living in this world. They belong to heaven and are ambassadors of heaven in this world, and as such they adapt to whatever they are, but always remain distant. Allegiance to the homeland is less important than the transcendent love which animates them, for the kingdom of God is their true homeland. This strange inhabited distance towards associations is not simply an accidental feature of Christian love, but is essential to it. Christians must be willing to transcend the boundaries and borders of belonging such that they love the other, the stranger, the poor, and even their enemies, for it is only in this way that the sin of Adam is overcome. And we're not talking about being pacifist here. We're not talking about you just get kicked in your face and you just like, oh, okay, like, you know, there's an aspect where we should turn the other cheek if we can, but in the reality of it, I don't believe Christians have ever been told that we can't defend our families, that we can't, defend sort of invasion of our space and an attack on our people. Sure, we can do that, and I do think that woke leftism is a major problem, and I think those people are psychotic. I think they're ruining a lot of things, but I think it's equally as satanic some of the talking points of the right. Like, I mean, it just seems like a false dialectic to me, and it thinks people are like burying down into these ideologies when our chief ideology should be orthodoxy if we're Christians, and we should, our culture should be Christ. That's really what it comes down to, you know. I appreciate it, Dark Connors. That's awesome. Um, yeah, cool, awesome, man. Really appreciate that. Okay, so and I want to thank everybody that's kind of tuning in right now. I appreciate you guys. So here's the issue, and I think this is the main issue we as Orthodox need to understand when it comes to this particular thing, because there needs to be a distinction made, right? And there's a good book on that. It's called The Resistance of Evil by Force by Ivan Ilyin. He talks about sort of the things we're facing now that, like, I guess the media is trying to push. Like, for example, they'll take something that happened in Charlottesville, right? And it's like, yeah, that's a righteous thing. We should stand up against somebody like killing some random woman. That's awful, right? But we shouldn't use that as justification to do some satanic act. Evil, you can't fight evil with evil and think you're going to be blessed by God, you know. Um, I don't know. But there's people like arguing for the death penalty. Like, I would say, render to Caesar what is Caesar's in that case. It's like, I'm not going to go out and protest the death penalty or something, or even really state my opinion on something. Like, I don't know enough about. If I were to look into this, I would want to have an orthodox take on it. I know that much. I wouldn't just want to state some conservative talking point. Um, and I'm not saying that conservatism as a whole is a problem. I don't think it's all a problem. I think those are good people. I think Protestants are good people. But the issue isn't about being good. It's about the salvation of our souls. And I want to be right with God. So there's a pathology built in the very roots of our existence, inherited through our birth, and that is the fear of the other. This is the result of the rejection of the other par excellence, our Creator, by the first man, Adam. The essence of sin is the fear of the other, which is part of the rejection of God. The result is the fear of otherness. We are not afraid of simply of certain others, but even if we accept them, it is on the condition that they are somehow other, like ourselves. We fear otherness. We identify difference with a division. We divide our lives and human beings according to difference. We organize states, clubs, fraternities, and even churches on the basis of difference. When difference becomes division, communion is nothing but an agreement for peaceful coexistence. It lasts only as long as mutual interests last, and may easily be turned into confrontation and conflict as soon as these interests cease to conclude. Similarly, I can't speak. Is not similarity is not the true foundation of Christian love, for similarity rejects the other as another and demands conformity. Ultimately, such love is only a form of self-love. True Christian love accepts all associations but recognizes that we must be distant from them to have the true love for all the children of Adam, for all the icons of God in this world. With this in mind, it should be clear that the problem with nationalism is not nationalism as such, or the idea of a nation. The problem is that Christians cannot simply identify with an ideology on association as the foundation of our social life. The Christian response to nationalism is not to say that there is something a better system, that nation is wrong or right, the thing on which to base our society. The Christian instead should realize that whatever society is based on, Christian allegiances will always come first. Ultimately, Orthodox Christians have not always lived up to the central teaching of the faith, which has been loyalty, whether it's been loyalty to Byzantium, Imperial Russia, Hellenism, Arabic civil nationalism, or Balkan forms of nationalism. Orthodox Christians have often been swept up in ideologies that have overtaken our fundamental Christian loyalties. It was precisely this problem which led to the Synod of 1872. Be that as it may, Orthodox Christians in the quote West are in a unique position to fully live up to the Christian witness. As a predominantly immigrant church in America, Orthodox Christians truly have been given renewed identity as strangers in a strange land. As such, the church is a critical juncture. If we ghettoize ourselves along nationalistic lines, whether Greek, Slavic, Arabic, or even American, we risk obsolescence. Demographic shifts and waning political times will prove these national struggles irrelevant in the long view of history. If, however, we live up to the prophetic witness of Christian loyalty, then we have the potential to become leaders in a society helping the modern world move past the excesses of modern nationalism. So, and I'll add this last point. Okay, so just so a distinction's made on what I'm saying here, because a lot of times people take what I'm saying out of context and they get very angry at me. And Orthodox Christians have gotten angry at me about this subject, and I think it's because I'm trying to have a sound approach to this question, and instead we have so many voices out here that want to give into their passions and their flesh, and they don't want to have a spiritual take on this subject, you know. Um, So if nationalism means love of one's homeland or people group, this is fine. If it, however, is a mask for malicious intent against other homelands or people groups, then it's evil, right? So if it's being used as a mask, I love my country, therefore I hate you, then that's, what's that? That doesn't make sense. If by ethnophilatism what is generally meant is the idea from the 1870s that by some Bulgarians that in essence sought to create exclusionary ethnic eparchies and drive out everyone else of not that ethnicity, which that happened, okay, that's condemned by the church. There's a difference between loving your family and then from that concluding you should kill your neighbors. It is generally replied that the phenomena in essence maybe not in all particularities. This is an argument, a polemic that's used against the, condemnation against ethnophilatism. They say it is generally replied that the phenomena in essence maybe not in all particularities did do what they condemned, and that may be true, but that would simply be the case. Balaam's ass or a broken clock is right twice a day. Hypocrisy from the Greco-centric Fanar doesn't mean God isn't going to use them. If people are very prideful and don't listen, God will, in many cases, allow them to fall into the very sins and errors they condemn others for as a lesson. So if you didn't catch what I'm saying here, so this was the condemnation. The definition given at 1872 Synod of Constantinople was: we renounce, censor, and condemn philotism, that is, racial discrimination, ethnic feuds, hatred, dissensions within the Church of Christ, as contrary to the teaching of the gospel and the holy canons of our blessed fathers, which, quote, support the Holy Church and the entire Christian world, embellish it, and lead it to divine godliness. There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female, for all are one in Christ Jesus. So that's the distinction that I think I'm making here. Just to make that clear, I think that distinction needs to be made. And it's not necessarily, what's up, machine? Yo. Okay.
Yo.
How you doing, man?
Yeah, chilling.
I'm kind of cooking. I'm cooking right now.
Nice.
Got it in a pot. So yeah, dude. So you know, I'm like watching on Twitter, and it's like Jay Dyer's out here like telling people, like rallying the troops, and he's got like weird, you know, neo-Nazi guys like you know, like pushing white nationalism and reposting all his content, and they're making like videos with the black sun, and you know what I mean? Like, what's going on with that, dude?
Well, he met Dugan twice.
Oh, did he?
Or I think he interviewed him once at least.
Oh,
I think he
really?
might have met him more than once. And then, and also, so I don't know when in his long um, list of religious conversions, right, he did that, right? Because it's been, I think he's been on the public stage since like 2008. And then he's had a series of conversions. And then Wilson
Yeah.
was talking to Lauren Chen,
Yeah.
and he said that the Groypers had put out a fatwa on Charlie Kirk.
Really?
Yeah, and this is Wilson supporting that. And then Wilson was last night on Piers Morgan with Jack Posobiec, who's
Okay.
connected to Alex Jones and all these people,
Right.
right? Major Trump supporter or whatever, part of the QAnon hoax.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
Right? And basically he was on there defending Jack Posobiec's position, and they were basically saying, "Oh, please don't call us fascists because people will shoot us." Right? We're just entertainers. Right? When his
Right.
name was Big Papa Fascist. That was
Oh, wow.
literally his original name on the internet. Right? So he was calling himself a fascist, and now he's saying if you call us a fascist, you're inciting violence against the right.
Well, you know, to bring up that point, okay, on fascism, because I think that, you know, I think there's going to be some younger guys that are going to like get caught in that, right? By these figures. And they're supposed to be Christians, but they're pushing like this um strange ideology, right? And it's not full. It's even worse than neo-Nazism because it's masking itself as Christianity. I don't even know what to call it, you know. Um, but all those talking points you just brought up are extremely important for the topic like I'm covering today. Like that's the meat right there. Because okay, this is what I'm. All right, here we go. I'm about to get to it. All right, all right, all right. One moment. Where is it at? Okay, here. Okay, so I have this text and it says there's an analysis suggests that Lindendorf. You ever heard of Lindendorf?
Yeah, I think it like sounds familiar for sure.
Okay, so Lindendorf selected Hitler. According to this paper I have, it says selected Hitler to destroy German people. If this is correct, it was the second time he used a messianic leader to destroy a nation. Ludendorff was the individual who sent Lenin to Russia. So we got this Ludendorff who selected Hitler to destroy Germany, and he sent Lenin to Russia. Ludendorff agreed to send the Bolsheviks into Switzerland by train through Germany, to where they would then travel to Russia via Sweden. Lenin, however, still took some convincing, insisting that he be sent on a sealed train. Lenin ultimately agreed on 31st March and departed to Switzerland on 8 April 1917. So I'm going to drop that link in the chat here, and people can check this out for themselves. I have other material that sort of like implicates both the Bolshevik movement and the Nazis as being a part of the same Masonic sort of dialectic. And in fact, the swastika was used by the this is a trip now. There's a book. There's a book on this by a guy. I'll pull up the book right now. Let me see if I can get it. Okay, so it's called The Ritual of the Operative Freemasons by Thomas Carr. So on the front cover is a swastika of that book. And so I'm going to explain this real quick on why I think these guys are a part of like a false dialectic. And I'm talking about Andrew Wilson and Jay Dyer, and I think they're all some form of Freemasonic revolutionaries that have been set up by some form of intelligence agencies within the Orthodox Church to sort of be a controlled opposition within America for the goals of this revolutionary movement. So this was a thing. Okay, so Blavatsky was a Freemason. Freemason's Nazi project began with his promotion of the famous mystic Helene Blavatsky. Developing a reliable account of Blavatsky's early life is impossible because she seems to have deliberately provided contradictory accounts and falsifications about her past. Furthermore, a few of her own writings before 1873 have survived, meaning that biographies must rely heavily on later accounts. The accounts of her early life provided her family members having been considered dubious biographies. Based solely upon this analysis, Blavatsky's claims to have been in Tibet as a youth. Okay, I'm going to skip all this. This isn't. This is where I'm getting at. Okay. All right. All right. Okay. Okay. Here it is. Blavatsky was a Mason who also initiated the Satanist. Blavatsky was a Mason. John Yarker, who also initiated the Satanist Aleister Crowley, made Blavatsky a brother of the adoptive rite of Freemasonry. Blavatsky's Masonic diploma was signed by Yarker and reads, quote, "We, the thrice illustrious sovereign Grand Master Generals, do declare and proclaim our illustrious enlightened brother H.P. Blavatsky to be our apprentice, companion, perfect mistress, sublime elect Scotch lady, grand elect, something D. Rose Croaks, Adonite mistress, perfect venerable mistress, and a crown princess of the right of adoption." The other founders of the Theosophical Society were Freemasons. To begin to understand Freemasons' connection to Nazism, it is necessary to recognize that the Theosophical Society was an annex of it. This is shown by the fact that, like Blavatsky, the other co-founders were also either overt Masons or direct connection to the organization. On 7 September 1875, George H. Felt gave a talk at Helena Blavatsky's parlor in New York. He spoke about the elemental spirits of the Egyptian temple mysteries, which he claimed to have subjugated, tested, and found efficacious. the assembled audience was so impressed with the importance of this work that they agreed to form a new fellowship, which would become known the Theosophical Society. Okay, so that's Esoteric World of Madame Blavatsky, Chapter 6. Felt was a versatile scientist, engineer. So Felt was a versatile scientist, engineer, and inventor, and was a member of a Masonic lodge. Okay, they got a link here. This is the link I sent in the chat, by the way. Felt genealogy. Henry Still Olcott was a co-founder, became the first president of the Theosophical Society in 1859. While reporting the hanging of John Brown, the abolitionist, for the Tribune, Olcott was arrested as a spy and condemned to death. However, he was released upon his appeal to the captors under the seal of a confidence of a Freemason. Okay, we got Charles Sotheran, another co-founder of the initiated as a Freemason on April 8th, 1872, in the United Grand Lodge of England. Sotheran was also active in the English Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross and in the Egyptian Rite Masonry. William Q. Judge, another individual present at the seminal meeting, was the son of Frederick Judge, a well-known Freemason. The term theosophy, so all these theosophists were Masons. Okay. The term theosophist came from the Greek theos, God, and Sophia, quote, wisdom, thus meaning, quote, God wisdom or divine wisdom. It should be noted that one mystery this analysis clarifies is theosophy itself, is spiritual system, is so ridiculous that it begs the question as to why it was invented, let alone popularized. However, once it is recognized that a group was organized for political purposes, the mumbo jumbo is explained. In addition to Blavatsky, Garibaldi also brought to England a new version of Freemasonry called the Ancient and Primitive Rite of Memphis Mizraim, sometimes known as Egyptian Freemasonry. Garibaldi was the Grand Hierophant or leader of the order. After his death, above mentioned John Yarker was named Grand Hierophant in 1902. The philosophy present by Memphis Mizraim was the basis for much of Blavatsky's secret doctrine, which Dieter, is that how you say that? Dieter Eckhart?
Yeah.
Okay. Claimed somehow inspired Adolf Hitler.
Yeah,
They said,
Diedrich Eckhart. Yeah.
Dieter, yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's
Dietrich?
like, yeah, he said he like wrote the music that Hitler danced to. It was like he's like the Thule Society.
Oh, wow. And so, I mean, what? I mean, I'm looking at this, dude. These people are definitely into this thing, right? Like that. I'm not tripping. It's gotta be, right? Like, I don't know. That rally with like Nick I'm not trying to get you to say it, but I don't know. Sorry. Okay, the Theosophical Society and the Rite of Memphis Mizraim has subsequently overlapped membership. For example, uh, Mr. Ruginald G. Macbin, the British ambassador to Palermo and a member of the Theosophical Society, was elected Grand Master of the Rite of Memphis Mizraim in Italy in 1921. The rite went dormant again in 1925 because of the opposition by Mussolini government, but Macmillan issued a charter to five prominent Masons, who were both members of the Memphis Mizraim Rite and the Theosophical Society. We got James Ingle Wedgwood, England; Charles Webster Leadbeater, Australia; George Arundel, England; G something crazy man. Oscar Colostrom, Australia. Okay, so he's got a history of Memphis, Mizraim and Memphis there. Okay, the Nazi used the swastika came from the Theosophical Society. Blavatsky used the swastika to represent her organization. She wrote, "Few word symbols are more pregnant with a real occult meaning than the swastika. It is symbolized by the figure 6, for like the figure it points in its concrete imagery as a ideograph of the number das. to the zenith and nearer to the north, the south, the west, and east, one finds the unit everywhere, and that unit reflected in all and every unit is the emblem of the active of Fohat, of the continual revolution of the wheels of the four elements of the sacred four, in their mystical and not alone in their cosmic meaning. Further, its four arms bend at the right angles are intimately related, as shown elsewhere, to the Pythagorean and Hermetic scales. One initiated into the mysteries of the meaning of the swastika, say the commentaries, can quote trace on it with the mathematical precision the evolution of the cosmos and the whole period of uh, Sandhya. I don't know, Sandhya. The Secret Doctrine, H.P. Blavatsky, Volume 2, Theosophy Company, Los Angeles, page 587. In fact, Blavatsky's bizarre understanding of the swastika seems to be deliberately to misdirect from one important fact. Given her connections to Freemasonry, it is dubious that Blavatsky was unaware that the swastika was the primary symbol of operative Freemasonry. Though seemingly trivial, her failure to mention Freemasons' use of swastika is important. It is an example of the use of the mysticism to camouflage Theosophy's connection back to Freemasonry. Moreover, based upon this analysis, the Nazis' use of the symbol was chosen to cryptically indicate who was really in control of the organization. Thomas Carr wrote, quote, among operative Freemasons, candidates are taken into a vault under the Grand Lodge room, and from the darkness look up to the center of its roof. There sees a large letter G, from which a plumb line is suspended, which hangs down into the chambers in which he is placed. He is told that this plumb line comes down from the pole star, and that the swastika is its symbol. The swastika is depicted on a sacred pedestal in front of him. When an operative lodge is opened in the VIP, each one of the Grand Masters puts his quote square together with the square of the volume of the sacred law in such a way as to form a swastika, which is much venerated symbol among operative Freemasons and is held to represent El Shaddai, or the Most High himself. That's from Thomas Carr, The Rituals of Operative Freemasons. And in the link, okay, to the article I'm reading from, there's a link to Thomas Carr's book, if I'm not mistaken, and you can get a digital copy of it. I've been reading it. So what do you think so far, man, about this little?
Yeah, I mean, part of the allure of Blavatsky was that she was claiming that the Memphis Mizraim tradition was actually based on Oriental Kabbalah that came from the East, right? This is why she moved her headquarters to Madras, India. But the traditions that she incorporated, right, part of Tantric, Buddhism, Vajrayana, and the Kala Chakra practices, right? They're observed in Tibetan Buddhism, right? And they also have the swastika there, right? In the bone tradition of the Tibetan Buddhists, right? So what they're incorporating is the tantric traditions, right? Because the Buddhist monks, right, in Tibet, they believe in the divine feminine and stuff. So in the Kala Chakra, there's all this stuff about these tantric rituals, um, and some of them are pretty obscene. We've been talking about it on the show. I won't repeat them here for your audience, but yeah, they're pretty obscene rituals.
I'm sure.
Um,
I'm sure.
yeah, it's like sex magic or whatever, and right?
Right, right. Which Crowley
So
was a
yeah,
huge proponent of, and that makes sense because
yeah,
the Blavatsky would be pushing it. If they got the same guy that brought him in, you know, to and help them establish Theosophy or whatever it is, whatever that guy's name's in the article. So
yeah.
this
So
is,
this is late tantric traditions in Buddhism called the
yeah, it's like a
Vajrayana or the
reworking of
Kala
that
Chakra.
stuff or something,
Yeah,
right?
yep, yeah, precisely. Yeah,
So this is the strange aspect of it. I know, like Dugan has come out and sort of like been open about his occult practices and sort of being a Rosicrucian of some sense. That's what I understand about him, right? And if he's in connection with Dyer, who's what, Frankfurt School? He was trained in that, I think, right?
Yeah, this is what he said. Yeah.
Hmm.
He said he was trained in Marxist theory. I think he said like something about like they're connected to Habermas or something like that. I don't know. Could be
Hmm.
wrong about that. Gary Habermas, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think the reality of it is that um, I mean, I don't see any other way around it because you know I look at the Moscow Patriarchate and you know, the whole entire structure of their military cathedral is designed like a Rosicrucian cross with a rose in the middle, and the like. I mean, if you look at a sky view of it, it's designed like the Rosicrucian cross. Okay. Um, there's a book called The Path to Ecumenism. I think that's what it's called. Um, and it goes over the Rosicrucian sort of revolution in Russia, where everybody wanted to be a Rosicrucian. Um, you know, Jason, the Rokor MP, anytime anybody brings up anything dealing with, you know, the Catacomb Church or the True Orthodox, he seems to shut down or shut that down. I want to know why, I guess. And another thing is why is it always this sort of like nationalistic, you know, plot? Why are you at like the, you know, trying to get crowds to do something stupid with Infowars? What's going on with that? Um, why is there people with neo-Nazi black suns following you and reposting your content, and they're acting as if they're Orthodox Christians? I mean,
Actually, you know, there's a show by Bill Cooper on the Hour of the Time, one of the
right?
most famous broadcasts, you know, in conspiracy history. Basically, popularized the term Illuminati and all this stuff. You know, so basically, he had a show, two shows called Alex Jones Exposed, in which he said he was inciting race riots. You know, and this is after the Rodney King beating,
Hmm.
right? So he actually accused Alex Jones of rigging his media coverage and releasing disinformation to try to cause and incite riots.
Yeah. Well, we're watching that in real time right now. They're taking the Charlie Kirk assassination and they're using it as a means to incite a race war. Right. And what's sick is that, you know, it's like you've infiltrated the Orthodox Church. You obviously hate Christianity. That's what I'm getting out of this. That you hate Christianity so much that you want to take the youth that are converting to Orthodoxy and then push them into these extreme ideologies. I mean, it's sick. What is that? Why? You know? Um, I don't know. So, oh wow, I just lost my page. No. Oh wow, I can't believe I just did that. It's happening to me, man. How did I do that? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But while you find it, I guess,
Yeah, run it.
yeah. I mean, it's an extremely weird situation. Right?
Yeah, I'm gonna go to this page right now. Actually, since I can't find that because I just lost it. I mean, well, I really didn't lose it because it's in the chat. I could just go there with it. So, let's see. Oh, look at this. Alex Jones. This is reposted from him one day ago. Jay Dyer. The Charlie Kirk assassination is a high profile event, and Christian nationalism as a reaction. What? Can you just say the plan out even louder? You know, crazy, dude. Um, okay, so this is the other aspect I have here that I was going to cover. Um, This is a quote from Father Seraphim Rosa. Just go ahead and say it. The whole idea of the New Age, of course, penetrates every fiber of the last 2 centuries, where their preoccupation with, quote, progress is the key idea. The very concept of revolution, from French to Bolshevik, is a central idea of modern occultism. Visible on the popular level is today's talk of the age of Aquarius, the astrological post Christian age, and has owned its spread probably chiefly to Freemasonry. There's a Scottish Rite publication in America called New Age. I regret to say that the whole philosophy is also present in the American dollar bill, which with its Masonic heritage, with its quote Novus Ordo Seclorum and its unfinished pyramid awaiting the 13th stone on top. In Christian terms, it is the philosophy of Antichrist, the one who will turn the world upside down and, quote, change times and seasons. Indeed, even the calendar is involved. For the most thorough revolutions, the French and Bolshevik tried and failed and had to be satisfied with the compromise of the Gregorian calendar. To introduce new calendars, the Pope and the Athenagoras have already expressed themselves as for the new, quote, universal calendar. And the whole concept of ecumenism, of course, is permeated with this heresy and the, quote, refounding of the church. Okay, so we got the refounding of the church. We're talking about that. That's part of this whole New Age movement that was being implemented by Freemasons who ascended the hierarchies of historical Orthodox churches. Um, so I'm going to say this. Okay, so about that calendar change, and notice they always attack the new calendars, and I mean the old calendars, and call us schismatics on all these things. Why is that? Okay, so we got to go back to the calendar change, the beginning of that. What's that about? I think this is why these talking heads do this. Is that the change of the old calendar was prepared and imposed upon the Greek people by certified Freemasons Chrysostom Papadopoulos, Metropolitan of Athens, and Meletius Potekis, Patriarch of Constantinople, in cooperation with the military coup of Plasterius Gonatas without the assent of the other Orthodox churches. In the 16th century, when Pope Gregory instituted a new calendar, he wrote to the Orthodox to encourage them to accept it. They refused and condemned the calendar on 3 separate occasions. One of these Orthodox councils resulted in a document called the Sigillion of 1583, and which condemned the new calendar as incompatible with the Orthodox faith. We got Saint Seraphim of Sophia. He says, ultimately, when dealing with the ecumenical question, we must recognize that going back to the very origin of ecumenism, there stands before us not only the age-old enemies of our Orthodox Church, but the father of lies and ruin himself, the devil. In former centuries, he sought to destroy the Holy Church by exalting her with all sorts of heresies, specifically by trying to mix Orthodox with heretics, and he is doing this now by using ecumenism and its inexhaustible Masonic capital. The reality is, all these guys are into Masonry, so that's where I'm at with it. Um, can I prove it definitively? Probably not, but I can say, like, well, do you remember the co-host name of Infowars Machine? The one that
Talking about Owen Schroeder.
is that who it is? The one that came out and admitted he was a Mason.
Um, I don't know, but I know like Roger Stone and Steve Bannon pretty much have admitted to such things. I mean, like Roger Stone said he carries a Zohar in his pocket. He has like a pocket Zohar.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then Steve Bannon is very, very pro Israel.
Hmm.
So a lot of people that he's had hosting events on his show. I think Steve Bannon hosted a show on InfoWars called The War Room with Steve Bannon.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'm pretty sure when I was watching, I seen Roger Stone had a segment on there too, back in the day. So I mean, I've watched it here and there just to see the optics, and yeah, so he's had some pretty interesting characters on there. Israel Firsters, right? A lot of them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. So he's got a bunch of Zionists on there. I know that the Southern Israelite guy says they won't cover the Mennonites of Malta for some reason.
Yeah,
Which,
like just to show you guys one of the examples, right? He used to blame Israel for 9/11, and then he switched around and said it's the Chicans and the Saudis working together. So he totally did an about face. He also did an about face on Putin. Okay, he said Putin was like the devil back in the day, right? And then today he says he's like one of the good guys or something like that, right? So
right,
he does a 180 on all these different, on his position, right?
right. And if you know anything about Putin, and I've got a short on here, the Habotniks are saying he's their guy, like he's one of them. These are Zionists. This is like a Zionist weird messianic cult. Like, big into the Kabbalah. I have I pretty much think that they were involved with the Rothschilds in the Russia situation in 1917 and had the Tsar overthrown, and then implemented the provisional government, the Masonic provisional government, and then set up Lenin, who we just this Lindendorf guy supposedly put Hitler and uh, Lenin in place. So
Yeah, that's a bomb drop. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's really what it's all culminating to is like whoever these guys are supposedly pitting each other like they're against each other and all that. No, that's not the case. I'm going to go to this quote from Plantinov.
Yeah, even this guy Hajalmar Schacht, right, who was like the president of the bank, right, where he funded uh Hitler, and he was basically like a Jayish Freemason.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's like numerous connections like that. So I mean, to even act as if it's like this black and white thing where they actually weren't. You know what? I'm gonna go to this Pike quote, dude, to Mazzini. Have you seen this quote before? It's crazy, dude. And now
Yeah,
I've had
Mazzini, Mazzini and Garibaldi, as you read earlier, they were connected to Blavatsky.
right, right. Now this is a Giuseppe Mazzini. Okay, now Giuseppe Mazzini, this guy, that this is a trip. Now, I've had Templars come at me for this letter, literally. Like they've come to me trying to refute this letter and say it doesn't exist and gaslight. And they've made like full on web pages like trying to refute this thing. You know what I mean? Like, so obviously they're very sensitive about this. So I'm gonna read this letter. It says Albert Pike's letter to Mazzini. Okay, so we got the following is a letter that speculation claimed that Albert Pike wrote to Giuseppe Mazzini in 1871 regarding a conspiracy involving three world wars that were planned in an attempt to take over the world. The Pike letter, I'm not going to say this is real or not, I don't know, but it sure does sound like it. The Pike letter to Giuseppe Mazzini was on display in the British Museum Library in London until 1977. This letter has been claimed by many internet sites to reside in the British Library in London, which denies the letter exists. Giuseppe Mazzini was an Italian revolutionary leader in the mid 1800s, as well as director of the Illuminati. We're talking about the Bavarian Illuminati, or a continuation of this. So it's not just some random conspiracy, I would say, if somebody's the leader of the Illuminati. So Albert Pike, historical Masonic figure, was a 33rd degree Freemason, occultist, Grand Master, and creator of the southern jurisdiction of the Masonic Scottish Rite Order. Following are apparently extracts from letters showing how 3 world wars have been planned for many generations. He says, quote, "The First World War must be brought about in order to permit the Illuminati to overthrow the power of the czars in Russia, of making the country a fortress of atheistic communism. The divergence of cause by the agents of the Illuminati between the British and the Germanic empires will be used to foment this war. At the end of the war, communism will be built and used in order to destroy the other governments in order to weaken the religions." Okay, and then he goes on to say, and then the Second World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the difference between the fascists and the political Zionists. This war must be brought about so that Nazism is destroyed and that political Zionism will be strong enough to institute a sovereign state of Israel and Palestine. During the Second World War, the international communism must become strong enough in order to balance Christendom, which would be then restrained and held in check until a time when we would need it for the final social cataclysm. Okay, so they're going to use Christendom for the final social cataclysm. How are they going to do that? Besides send the hierarchies of the churches. Okay, the Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of differences caused by the agents of the Illuminati, quote Illuminati, they say, between the political Zionists and the leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and the political Zionists, the state of Israel, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to a fight to the point of complete physical, moral, and spiritual and economic exhaustion. We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horrors will show clearly the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and the most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries will exterminate those destroyers of civilization, and the multitude disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an ideal, without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view. This manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement, which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time. So that's their Luciferian New Age plan, in other words.
Yeah. Yeah. Add to that, you know, the Christians are nationalists and the Arabs are like, rich, like businessmen or some shit.
Right, and that's what they're talking about, right? It's like pitting those two
Yeah,
ideologies.
like there's a guy behind
Right.
the Christian Zionist,
Uh huh.
right? There's a guy behind the Islamist,
Right.
jihadist, right, or whatever that's funding them both, right?
Right. Right. To go at each other or to pit people to go at each other. And on that point, some people might say, let's say, like, play devil's advocate on that point. It's like, well, what can you give an example of something like that ever happening? It's yes. And this is that example. The
Yeah,
Zion,
yeah, like when he said unleash the atheists and the nihilists. That's
yeah,
these guys. That's like the Jay Dyers and the people.
exactly, exactly, right, exactly, and they are doing battle with the atheist, right, and they're the nihilist.
Yeah, nihilism versus atheism, or
Hmm.
philosophy versus science, really.
Yeah,
And right, which represents both because it's philosophical nihilism versus scientific atheism.
exactly. Deistic nihilism. It's really what it's kind of becoming, isn't it? Something like that. Um, but anyways, this is the quote. So um, The Zionist leaders of the Western world saw Hitler's rise to power and the implementation of his bloodthirsty plans as an opportunity to unite the Jews in the struggle for the establishment of a Zionist state on the lands belonging to the Arab people. As early as the end of the 19th century, in the depths of the Jewish political sects, a bloodthirsty plan was hatched, according to which a significant part of the Jewish people became hostages in the hands of the Talmudic conspirators against humanity. Ordinary Jews were destined to play the role of material, sacrificial meat in the struggle of the Zionist leaders for power over the world. At one of the Zionist meetings, it was bluntly stated, quote, "If our plans are not fulfilled by means of financial influence, then we must push our people to the greatest suffering in order to unite them." As the well-known Kabbalist M. Lightman later stated, quote, "Since our people are not very inclined to choose the path of the Torah, the Creator pushes us to accept this path through suffering. By sending us the Holocaust, He brought us back to Eretz Israel and gave us this land." On the basis of this ideology, the Zionist leaders decided to make Hitler their instrument for the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine. As German journalist G. Horn wrote, quote, "The Zionists perceived the establishment of the Nazis in Germany not as a national catastrophe, but as a unique historical opportunity for the realization of Zionist intentions. As soon as the Zionists and the National Socialists elevated race and nation to the scales of all things, it was inevitable that a common bridge would arise between them. In 1963, the catalog of papers and microfilms of the documents of the Ministry Archives was published in the United States. Foreign Affairs of Germany, for which it followed that having come to power, the leadership of the Third Reich entered into a direct agreement with the Zionists. In his book, quote, "The Other Side of the Coin," published in the United States, the Jewish public figure A. Lithenthal noted that, quote, "In the first months of the existence of Hitler's Germany, the Zionists were the only representatives of the Jews who dealt with the German authorities, and they used their position to discredit anti-Zionists and Jews who advocated assimilation. As a result, an agreement was reached between the Jewish agency and the Nazi authorities, who promised to help the immigration. This assistance was provided by the Gestapo and the SS, on the initiative of one of the leaders of the Jewish agency, H. Arzanasrov, in 1933. A plan for the resettlement of the Jews from Germany to Palestine was approved in Berlin. The quote, "Palestine Bureau of the Zionist Colonization Trust" is being formed. The Palestine, quote, "Karen Gazod and Karen Hamzat D'Azriel," in which, in particular, one of the future founders of the State of Israel, Levi Eshkol, worked. Okay, so on a big point I'm going to make right now. This is from a German magazine, a Masonic magazine, called Die Behut. It says, "Without the German Reformation, no Freemasonry. Without 1517, no 1717. Therefore, we Masons may erect a memorial for him, Luther, as first ancestor of Freemasonry." Okay, so let's put this. What am I saying right here? Also, and most scholars believe that a Lutheran named Johannes Valentinus Andre authored the Rosicrucian Manifestos. He also admitted to have done so. So, well, I'm less commenting on the Protestant Reformation right now, but I'm trying to point out that German Masonry, you know, considered. Okay, what am I saying? German Masonry considered the Kabbalah, as all Masonry is. I'm going to point this out. Kabbalah is used in very many of the higher degrees of Masonry, and entire Masonic teachings are based on its principles. Elsewhere, it is stated, "An attentive study of the different Masonic degrees demonstrates the indisputed influence of Kabbalistic tradition on Freemasonry." So, the reality of the matter is, these are all Freemasons. We've already gone over this. So I think everybody gets what I'm saying. So, it's a little hard to put together, but. That was a jumbled mess. But I mean, it really is kind of hard to.
But yeah, one of the things I put together on my show was this whole idea of just how many things were going on in the late 1800s. Right? You
Yeah.
got the you got the Industrial Revolution. You got Giuseppe Mazzini and the Young Italy. You got Blavatsky. Right? You got the American Civil War going on. Right? Okay. You got all
Whoa.
this. Yeah. You got Karl Marx. Right? You got William James quoting Vivekananda.
Oh wow.
Right? You got so you have the battle between scientism and spiritualism. You have the entire idea of the World Zionist Congress in 1895. Right? You have the Theosophical Society. Right? Which I already mentioned. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting. The number of innovations that happened in the late 1800s. Right? And all of them, I mentioned how Darwin, Marx, Blavatsky, right? How all three of them talked about some idea of progress, right? How everything's going to get better and better, right? So it's kind of interesting. They pointed to a world civilization, even, in a lot of ways.
Like this utopian, everything's going to be pink lemonade coming out of
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Like
oceans.
Marx was part of a utopian organization called League of the Just that talked about the kingdom of God. And of course, they had stolen this terminology from the Swedenborgs,
Mm.
right? And Kant and all these, people like Rudyard Kipling, and they were all influenced by Swedenborg. William Blake, number of people.
Right. So I have this book I found on the New Age, right? It's a very old book um, on the New Age movement. And let's see. Go to this chapter on globalism and the New Age movement. So I think this might. The big picture from the wrong angle. The straight answer on New Age globalism. I was reading a little bit of this last night, and I thought it was just pretty unreal. So it starts out with a quote from Bertrand Russell. I'm sure you've covered him on your show, right?
Oh yes.
Russell, okay. So this is what Russell had to say. He says science has made unrestricted national sovereignty incompatible with human survival. The only possibility now are world government or death. Okay, quote, unless the concept of planetary government is universally accepted, the human race must live with the perpetual threat of nuclear war, or extinction, rather. Letters to editor, Time. Quote, we have an obligation to expose and attack the world of the Bible worship, salvation, heaven and hell, and all the mystical deities. That's from a magazine, The Humanist. And here's another quote from John Denver, the singer and composer. He says, "One of these days I'll be so complete I won't be human. I will be a god." So we see it even in music. John Denver, Bertrand Russell, a letter writer from Akron, Ohio, and the editor of the Humanist. What do they have in common? All have enthroned man at the center of existence, and all have concluded that the nationalistic sovereignty and patriotic pride are deadly foes to be extinguished. All ascribe to a form of political and social philosophy known as globalism. So this is the other side of the coin, I think. So there's those that want to bottle down into like these tribalistic ethnophilatism type thing where it's like a bad form of nationalism. Like being patriotic isn't necessarily evil, right? Like we could be. I don't know how to. I've kind of laid that out already, so I'm going to move forward. Delineating a term like globalism isn't easy. Definitions vary from one advocacy group to another, depending on whether their primacy allegiance is to scholarly interest or one world unity concepts, but all globalists have found the welcome mat out among New Agers. Despite their differences, globalists hold certain things in common. Ethnocentricity, ethnocentricity has to go. Believing that one cultural heritage is superior is a no-no. Quote, equivalency is the goal. The idea of all governments, as well as all legal and economic systems, diverse, identical international respect. Among globalist aspirations are abolition of the traditional family structure, which is a good thing, an international court of law to arbitrate the worldwide dispute, and a common economic structure. International laws would abolish war, hunger, and poverty. Extreme factions even suggest that children be produced by genetic control, with fertilization and gestation occurring outside the body. Most globalists favor unilateral disarmament. The New Age movement is a key to achieving these goals. Political practicalities are possible in any society only if a corresponding ideology provides philosophical support. New Age thinking furnishes globalism with an integrated value system drawn from various mystical religious traditions. New Age globalism would replace belief in a transcendent deity with reliance on man's inherent goodness and wisdom. To oversee this arrangement, a more liberally funded United Nations with greater powers of police enforcement would be established. Widespread injustice, nuclear arsenals and warheads in waiting, famine in measureless proportions, mankind on the edge of time, the ways the New Agers see our planet, a world inhabited by a dangerous species called man. What's to be done? The solution is supposedly simple: achieve a state of inner peace and reconcile differing political ideologies. Meditate, smile, be peaceful, become one with your adversaries. As Zen Master puts it this way: imagine yourself as swimming in a river, then imagine yourself as the river. Become the river to understand its perspective. Then imagine yourself as a Soviet, become the communist. A new understanding of political consciousness will overcome you. As each citizen of the planet follows, the world will become one. The organization Abound that seek to achieve these ends. Volunteers for Peace Inc. sponsor their own Peace Corps that promote living and working in foreign countries. Citizens Exchange Council advocates exchange between Russians and Americans. World Peace University envisions a world where, quote, peace is in the way, where hunger no longer exists, and where individuals achieve their higher degree of personal fulfillment. New Age techniques to accomplish world peace range from so called citizen summitry, quote, promoting international personal diplomacy, to visualization and affirmation methods which preserve peace by mentally creating a state of harmony. Some New Agers advocate peace tax fund bill by which Congress could mandate a taxpayer's rights to designate tax contributions for non-military purposes. Much New Age focuses on anti-nuclear interests, support establishment of nuclear-free zones where atomic weapons facilities, equipment, supplies would be banned. Some even suggest the countries announce the right to be defended by nuclear weapons. Dr. F. Richard Snyder of the World Peace University says, quote, uh, humankind in kinship with the earth is embarking on a historic journey that will lead to the highest peaks of consciousness of the end of the survival as we know it. At the very moment, you and I, along with our fellow planetary travelers, have a common destiny in our hearts and minds. What is that destiny? Visualize a world in which there is no right or wrong, politically speaking. There is no other side, no enemy, no inevitability of war. The planet is one, and we are one with the planet. This physical reality becomes a political reality, and these aspirations can be achieved only when mankind acquires higher consciousness. This will be done by allowing the self generating powers of love and hope to heal each other's inner self. Then the world will be healed. I think the goal to achieve this is to have all these people with these ideologies sort of like he was saying I'm not saying this guy, but I'm saying, like Pike was saying, to destroy themselves, and then they can implement their Luciferian doctrine. At the end of 1986, it was the world of instant cooperation, known as the World Healing Meditation. In the summer of 1987, it was the Harmonic Convergence. These events attempted to draw together humanists, idealists, and the globalists under the banner of the New Age. The underlying concept was that 1% of the critical mass of the Earth's population gathering in harmony to produce a vibratory resonance would introduce a quantum leap forward in the movement towards world peace. Both events were billed as capable of inducing global uh, uh, unanimity, producing supernatural healings, and inaugurating a quote planetary Pentecost. A much heralded quote quantum leap was the next purported stage in the quote spiritual evolution towards reaching Godhead. The impetus for the December 31st, 1986 World Healing Meditation was a book entitled Practical Spirituality by John Rudolph Price. The author told of the communicating with ascending awakened one, a spirit entity who called himself Asher. In one encounter, Asher declared, quote, there will be a uniting of spiritually minded people on the planet through a particular vibration in the ethers. This fusion of energy will reach a peak in December 31st, 1986, and it will remove the threat of global war. Price may have gotten Asher's message, but the critics argue retrospectively that Asher must have misinformed the Iraqis, the Iranians, Palestinians, the Afghanis, and plus assorted terrorists. Okay, that was the response of people on this. And Asher's message reassured some of the frightened others, particularly those not enamored with New Age monologues. What did Asher mean when he warned that, quote, those individuals with lower vibratory rates will be removed during the next 2 decades? To Christians, it smacked of New Testament passages referring to the Antichrist. Asher was hardly encouraging when he declared, quote, those looking for a savior can find one in the mirror. That's a key concept too. This be your own savior thing. That's Vivekananda. He says that. He says the only savior you're gonna find is like yourself reaching out in the dark or something, right? Um, okay, so the harmonic convergence of August 16th through 7th. You gonna say something?
Oh no, I was just gonna uh talk about that idea of becoming conscious,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like you just become aware, so like just like a flip the switch, right? Moment, and it's kind of like this idea about the global brain, like you just
Mm-hmm.
kind of tune into it, and then so there's nothing that has to be done. Like you just go into the Akashic records, as they say, right? So it's
Who was talking about that? The revolution will not be televised. That's what he's talking about.
that's Gil Scott Heron.
Yeah, Gil Scott. That's what he was talking about. That everybody would just flip. They would just change their minds out of nowhere. You know. I don't know if
Right,
it's
like
exactly what you're, going into the
yeah, that
Akashic
is what he's
records.
trying to say. Like
Yeah,
like these people are trying to say, like, oh yeah, you're just gonna like turn it on, and
Christ
you know
consciousness. You know what I
yeah,
mean? You'll
exactly, yeah.
be there, and everybody would just be, on the same vibration, man.
Yeah,
We'll
that's
change the
actually
world.
Blavatsky's Messiah, right? It's
The
the Christ.
Maitreya.
Yeah, the awakening of the Christ consciousness. Yeah, Maitreya. Yeah.
Yeah, or something like yeah. Okay, so the Maitreya. Yeah, I think he talks about that actually in this little book here. He goes, global humanism. And New Age globalists have created is probably the tenets of humanism, a man centered, quote, religion. Humanism has drawn fire from Christian parents concerned about school textbooks and from television evangelists who see it as the enemy of Americanism and evangelism. A publication called The Humanist recently stated, quote, we would be particularly specific and energetic in attacking such quack millennialists as Billy Graham, such battle reactionaries as Pope Paul, because they represent the greatest anti-humanist aggregates in our society. Responding to assaults on humanism by religious right humanists often allied themselves with atheists, secularists, civil libertarians because of their eclectic social vision. They also have found friends with the globalists and all those committed to the idea of planetary unity and custodianship of the Earth's monetary and environmental resources. Prominent New Ager Dr. Robert Mueller, former Secretary of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. So he's a prominent New Ager, and he's the former Secretary of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. Has said, quote, humanity is evolving towards a whole coherent global form best described by a metaphor of the human brain. Each person, young or old, able bodied or handicapped, is an important neuron in the emerging planetary brain that is constituted by the meridian network among people. Such views represent an incredible shift in the thinking of Western civilization. For several centuries, a theocentric worldview has dominated nations of the First World. Now, an anthropocentric perception of society is gaining precedence. The Earth itself is seen as a kind of living organism, demanding globalists and New Agers to oppose the industrial developed and nuclear power. Traditional concept of God have no place on the agenda of globalists. Humanist Manifesto 2 states, quote, as non-theists, we begin with humans, not God, nature, not deity. No deity will save us. We must save ourselves. This fits well into the framework of New Age ideology. Since man is perceived as a god who is capable of saving himself, likewise, the humanist condemns diversity of worship of an impediment to progress. In fact, humanists believe all religions are a disservice to the human species. Since the New Age movement wants to synthesize all religious doctrines into a eclectic system, old orders of religion would be abolished and replaced with a globalist set of beliefs acceptable to both humanists and New Agers. Global pantheism. Globalists have also advanced the idea of universal interdependence in which God and nature are fused into one. The groves may no longer be worshipped, but the hills and trees are revered, resacralized, as the New Agers put it, to the extent that man is no longer a unique moral creature. Today, a merged perception of God's being and man's existence dominates Western thought, closely resembling Hinduism. God is seen as being at one with and and pervasive in all matter. Thus, moral objectives are measured by their contribution to cosmological oneness, not personal moral accountability to transcendent creator. And if God is not out there looking down on each person's moral conduct, then right is what each part of the one perceives right to be. Interdependence is a commonly heard term among globalists and New Agers. In fact, globalists have drafted what they call a quote declaration of interdependence, whose stated purpose is as follows, quote, to establish a new world order of compassion, peace, justice, and security. It is essential that mankind free itself from the limitations of national prejudice and acknowledge that the forces that unite it are incomparably deeper than those that divide it. The futurists, the architects, and the inventor Buckminster Fuller said, quote, cosmic evolution is irrevocably intent upon completely transforming differently competing entities into a completely integrated, comprehensive, considerate, harmoniously whole. Ugh, that was a lot. New Age proponent Benjamin Cream, a founder and father of the New Age movement, pushes through the Terra foundation of a periodical called Share International, claiming to receive directives from a spiritual master known as uh, Maitreya. Is that how you say it? How did you say it again?
Maitreya.
Maitreya. Okay, Maitreya. There we go. So we got Benjamin Cream. If you know anything, Father Seraphim Rose, or Saint Seraphim Rose rather, in his book Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, he mentioned Benjamin Cream, if I'm not mistaken. So Cream promotes unselfish allotments of all national resources as the only way to solve starvation. Globalism's social agenda is guided by several presuppositions that are highly amendable to the New Age movement. First, the entire planet Earth, including its oceans and biosphere, is seen as the common property of mankind because the purity of Earth's water and air affect all living creatures. Globalists insist that all of nature be placed under the international jurisdiction. New Agers readily accept uh, the proposition because of their pantheistic principles. To them, nature is not only independent or interdependent, but also cosmologically interrelated because of its one source. If, quote, all is one, as the mystic declares, that the proposition can be easily ratified by legislative powers that are internationally binding. The New Age movement easily combines metaphysical and political concepts. For example, the New Agers speak one moment of the necessity of data flow across the borders, ecology, interdependence. In the next breath, they refer as easily to planetary self-realization. To the humanist globalist, there is no God. All that matters will matter. All that matters is matter. That's all right with the New Ager, since his premises conclude de facto that the planet is God. The New Age philosophy of holism also underpins this social agenda. If man, nature, Mother Earth, and their entire cosmos are interconnected, the national sovereignty would be antithetical. The globalist needs only to the rational of an apparent logic to confirm his conclusions. But the New Ager relies on mystical experience of oneness achieved in altered states of consciousness plus the messaging of trans-channeled entities, both confirming unitary awareness and global interdependence. The scene of social engineering is best placed and to observe the mutuality of globalism and humanism. Among the items of their bilateral agenda are the abolishing of traditional family structures, minority rights, and universal education. As for women's rights, both tend to see our male dominated society as stemming from West Judeo Christian heritage. The New Age movement tends to be more matriarchal. Some contingencies have resurrected ancient ideas of goddess worship, tracing their devotion to such archaic deities as Diana and Aphrodite. The global goddess. Fertility cults were common in ancient agrarian societies. People were close to the earth and especially conscious of reproductive cycles in their herds and families. Fruitlessness was crucial to survival, so female orientated nature religions flourish. Idols of Artemis were depicted with multiple mammaries to nourish life. With such matriarchal emphasis came to believe that women were usually gifted spiritually. Male dominance as a source of spiritual guidance and creator of the species future was relatively new cultural phenomenon that arrived with the supremacy of Christianity in the West. European society viewed man as the creator and myth maker of civilization. It is men who forge the way into the wickedness or the wilderness of the economic competition. Men who wage wars and build weapons of mass destruction. It is the virility of men that emblazons the silver screen in the roles of Rambo and Terminator. It is men who serve primarily as our priests and pastors. New Age globalists see this as a cosmic imbalance, the reason for the nuclear precipice of which humanity hangs. They envision a world led by women, with feminine spirituality and wisdom predominating over an elevated consciousness. This synthesis of feminism and spiritual devotion is known as woman's spirit, a convergence of the quote cosmic mother to her rightful place as central in the earth's religion. certain feminist New Agers have planned resurrecting the mysteries of the goddess worship by erecting temples to the female deities of antiquity. What do you think about this stuff right here?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of crossover with some of the stuff that I was covering, like this whole idea of cosmic evolution and Buckminster Fuller. I just mentioned him today, where he was exercising a key influence on Stuart Brand, and how Henry A. Murray, who was one of the key scientists who did the MK Ultra study, like he was
Wow.
talking about a one world government and all this stuff, and I mean, I think Neurojack was playing a whole entire thing by James Lindsay where he was reading a UN document written by Robert Mueller where he was
Right.
talking about cosmic evolution. The guy's like full on Teilhard de Chardin,
Yeah, it's
on
crazy.
steroids. Yeah, it's wild. Yeah.
He's telling me about that James Lindsay stuff, and he said he was pointing out how that this false dialectic with the whole national, the white nationalism stuff is going on. The Christian nationalism, we'll just call it Christian nationalism, because I mean that's what they want it. I mean, I don't know what it is. What is it? Christian fascism? Like, what could you call it? But he said he was pointing out. What did he say? I can't remember. I gotta watch that. That's really what I gotta do. I don't. I mean, I shouldn't even comment on it. I haven't watched it.
Yeah, but by the way, Mueller, he also did the investigation into the Russian involvement into the election, or whatever.
Oh yeah, you had the Mueller report, right?
Right. So it's pretty interesting, all right? Because like,
So Mueller's the wait. So let's run that back for a second. Mueller's has this connection with the guy I brought up earlier that's involved with the New Age. So Mueller's a New Ager, in other words, right?
yeah, heavily.
Okay,
Like
so he's
one of the
heavily
top ones, like world government, like Theosophist, right, level. Right.
okay. So wow, all right. So he's on that wave, and he's the guy that's supposedly investigating the Russia rigging their election. And now, if you know anything about Dugan and that whole thing, and I'm like, dude, I'm about to expose this soon about how the MP, I think all their leadership are Rosicrucians, or at least they would talk like it. You know what I mean? They're into some New Age stuff, and they got
Yeah,
elders over there that are like teaching New Age
yeah,
doctrines.
like Dugan, he's heavily into Martinism.
Okay, so what's Martinism? Could you break that down a little bit?
It's kind of like an offshoot of Freemasonry, but
Okay,
there's these two guys, right? And one of them, Saint Martin, who's kind of like a socialist. I mean, in a lot of ways. I mean, he's interesting sort of dude, and he was also hugely influenced by Swedenborg.
so this name Swedenborg keeps popping up. I hear this guy a lot lately.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like Blavatsky and Swedenborg. They're like two guys that took the occult in like a very like neo pagan direction, right?
right.
Whereas Freemasonry was like very Jewish, and then it took on like pagan overtones because of these two guys.
Speaking of which, I got some new stuff I translated from Greek. Um, Satanism and the position of depth psychology. Have you heard of this thing called depth psychology?
Yeah, it's like Gestalt or whatever. But yeah, it might be related to the stuff they're doing at the Esalen Institute, right?
What do you think Adorno goes into that? Like, you know how his whole thing was like induce
Yeah,
schizophrenia on the population or something. Uh,
yeah.
was he
He
involved with that or what?
he wrote the report on the authoritarian personality that was
Right.
used for MK Ultra, right?
Oh, okay. So this is tying back to
Yeah, so
Mueller.
Adorno is directly involved. The
Yeah,
Frankfurt School, he's the
definitely,
tie-in between the
definitely.
Frankfurt School and MK Ultra,
Yeah, I got stuff on that. That's pretty
and he's pretty much a huge proponent of Hegel.
right.
If you read Adorno, he's like obsessed with Hegel.
Okay. And now, and what we're saying, this is tying back into this whole dialectic we're seeing, right? Between the Zionists and the supposed fascists. Hmm. Okay. So
Right, the Zionist Bolshevik dialectic. Right.
right, right, and it's garbage. Both sides of Freemasonry. Depth psychology interprets the phenomenon of Satanism and its practice with its own data. According to Freud, now this is a translation from Greek, so it has weird stuff in it. So it says the occult creepy is an expression of traumatic. I don't know what that means. The occult creepy. Uh, the expression of traumatic situations that have been repressed and forgotten. The demon is a reflection of the repressed side of the soul that is projected as quote our alien self. So this was from Freud, and it's naming some book, Piranha and Perversion, Frankfurt, 1974, page 287. According to Freud, both God and the devil exist only within man. The demon is God's alter ego. Okay, so S. Freud, Totem and Taboo, Frankfurt, 1984. According to Freud, God and the demon are, quote, archetypes and reflections of the Father. Depending on the perception one has of the Father and parents in general, the devil is identified with aggression, with the spirit of denial and revolution, with repressed desires that demand satisfaction in contrast to the prevailing sexual morality and cultural prohibitions. Here, God represents the higher morality. Who does that sound like? Does that not? I mean, that's straight out of Peterson's mouth. There, you know what I mean? God represents the higher morality, while Satan becomes the protagonist of pleasures and excesses. Just as in a film, we have positive and negative. In a
Well,
symbol,
Peterson is outright promoting Carl Jung, right? So it's like
yeah,
crazy stuff.
yeah, he is. Um, which I mean, very early, I guess on what I would call my spiritual journey, I got into kind of like Jungian psychology,
Oh
and
yeah,
I
he's
thought it was
definitely no
interesting.
dummy, but it's like, it's pure Gnosticism.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's like, like he had a ring of Abraxas. It's like the snake on the cross. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
There's
man.
some images where it's like a chicken with like, or like some weird being with like serpent leg, like a chicken with serpent legs on like a chariot. You know what I mean? Crazy.
Yeah,
Whatever
it's
that's
weird, dude.
supposed to mean. Oh, but what is Abraxas? It's like good and evil. There is no good and evil. It's like the gray area. And Manson talked about Abraxas too in his interviews with the Satanist. What's the Nicholas something that was married? Um, or
Yeah,
was it? Yeah,
yeah. I mean, in hypostasis of the archons,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, the snake is the good guy, right? And you know, and the fall of man or whatever.
Right, right. And that's the same narrative you see from someone like Rules to Radicals. You know what I mean? Something like that. Like the leftists are big into that type of like Satan got his own kingdom or Lucifer, got his own kingdom in some sense. Um, God and Satan were two aspects of the same thing. That's what he says. That's Abraxas, pretty much. According to Freud, the occult element has its roots in magical thinking and childhood phobias. According to childhood thinking, everything is an indissoluble and inseparable unity. There is no differentiation between cause and effect. The fragmentations of this unified image of the world, a pre infancy creates a traumatic situation. In this way, psychoanalysis, quote, solves every transcendental problem. According to E. Hinman, The Virgin Mary and the Wicked Witch are two aspects of the same thing and are due to the cultural fragmentation of the image of the Mother. E. Hinman, Hexatagonist, Ein Social Analytische Studie, Frankfurt, 1989. In the psychology of C.G. Jung, the idea of archetypes dominates. These are images of the collective consciousness. Among them are gods and goddesses in various mythologies, who are in relation to specific psychic realities of humanity. Though this idea of archetypes, a new foundation of polytheism, was created. The existence of various deities is subjective, but they are more than a pure product of the collective consciousness of humanity. One can worship them because they manifest and represent forces that make the individual transcendent. One can at the same time methodize their existence since they express parts of the individual. According to Jung, therefore, there are no transcendent realities. What we call, quote, God or, quote, gods, evil spirits, or even Lucifer, are in reality situations within man that express outwardly. They are forces within man and not outside of him. Man creates the gods, not the gods create man. Man determines the existence of, quote, life of the gods, and the opposite does happen as we Christians believe. Okay, and so man determines the existence of life of the gods, and the opposite does happen. That's what Christians believe. I don't know. Understand? I mean, it's because it's translated from Greek. In this view, to understand the gods is to understand oneself. To worship them is to develop spiritually. To identify with them is to find meaning in one's life. That's J.G. Helton, Magic, Witchcraft, and Paganism in America. Bibliography, New York, London, 1982, page 20. Jung's legacy is found in the Gnostic Church, in magical rituals, and the movement of young witches. It is also found in forms of Luciferianism, which shows interest in Jung's interpretation of the Trinity. The meaning of the Trinity is analyzed in terms of archetypes, and a reconstruction of the Trinity in the sense of tier-digit theology is proposed. A complete system of archetypes must include four actors: the Father, which constitutes the unity, for two sons, namely Christ and Lucifer, who constitutes the opposition, and the Holy Spirit, who constitutes the reconciliation or reunification. Process church. I think that's what they're getting at there, right? According to Jung, Christ and the demons are equally powerful but opposite emanations of the Father. Thus, Satan is considered the fourth person of God, and the Trinity becomes a tetrad. This reconstruction of the triad is also considered to have therapeutic significance in Jung's entire system. The quote dark side, expressed through demons when repressed into the subconscious, is responsible for all kinds of problems. See C.G. Jung, Psychology and Religion, 1977, pages 88 to 111. We see how Jungian psychology meets occultism in its various forms, uh, especially in the realm of so-called psycho-cults, which promise an expansion of consciousness and a higher spiritual level, quote, spiritual level, and demonstrated by, quote, experience of a former Satanist, to which he referred to, quote, the expansion of consciousness and, quote, spiritual evolution, are the main goals of Neo-Satanism and its, quote, practices, especially sexual rituals and orgies, sex magic. Jungian psychology does not strengthen Christian theology, but completely negates it. It spreads amongst theologians, threatens to erode their orthodox theological thinking. Moreover, if this psychology is used in orthodox pastoral care, it secularizes it, regardless of whether this is perceived or not. Excerpt from the book Neo Satanism, Orthodox Theory and Treatment. So then I got the second bit here. So this is a continuation of this bit on the Satanism. It's do you want to add anything to that? You were thinking?
Yeah, like with the Jung stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, like I was reading this on my show. It says it says during the period when Jung began composing his occult-themed Red Book, his lover, Toni Wolff, was a crucial figure in his life. Wolff published little under her own name, but helped Jung develop some of his best-known concepts, including anima, animus, and persona, as well as the theory of the psychological types. Her best-known paper is an essay on four quote-unquote types or aspects of the feminine psyche: the Amazon, the Mother, the Hetera, and the Medial woman. Jung and Wolff believed they had founded a new religion, conceived through polygamy, which was reminiscent of Sabbatean antinomianism. According to Knoll, in the book The Aryan Christ, on page 94, it says, quote, they believed in a new faith in which their former sins and evils became necessary for spiritual rebirth. God, no longer one, would emerge from individual visionary experiences and automatic writing as a multitude of natural forces or entities that were both good and evil. Unquote.
Wow. Now, you brought up antinomianism, right? And if I'm not mistaken, I think you told me this before, that Luther kind of descended into antinomianism and libertinism or something, right?
Well, it was based on his writings. He himself condemned it,
Oh,
but
okay.
but
They took from it at least, right?
yeah, yeah, it was based on. He had to condemn it because people were playing fast and loose with some of his basic concepts.
I
So he,
see.
so so you know,
So I'm guessing like there were chiliastic kind of sects that branched out from his original kind of, hermetic Protestant Rosicrucian beliefs or something. Because he's all into alchemy and all that, and I can't, and he
yeah,
seems to have been had an affinity to the Kabbalah, so it's
yeah,
hard to say like he wasn't against those things.
yeah. He colluded with people like Philip Melanchthon, also Johannes Reuchlin, right? That basically were, you know, heavily promoters of um, of alchemy, Kabbalah. He corresponded with them on the subject, right? Talking about how alchemy is the art of the ancients, and about how salvation by faith is the Christian Kabbalah, right? So
Yeah,
yeah, so
yeah,
he was an interesting dude. Obviously, he had a mixed view about the Jays, both using their influence, right, to compose his understanding of his interpretations of the Bible and his sola scriptura methods. Right, he
right.
thought he could go to the Jays because he could not trust the church. He saw the Pope as the Antichrist.
Yeah,
So
so
he
he
had
went to the
totally,
Jewish Gnostic sages and started implementing some of their Kabbalistic understandings, and that's where the sola fide doctrine comes in. It's like it developed into this Kabbalistic ritual magic, kind of among modern evangelicals now say like a mere profession of faith can save you, as if the words themselves contains an inherent mystical power to regenerate individual by simply speaking them. That's a Kabbalistic concept for the record. Like you
yeah,
speak some word and then you're good. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. This is a quote by to paraphrase Martin Luther. He said God does not make salvation for fictitious sinners, and he said even if you commit murder and fornication 1,000 times a day.
wow. I have to play off that. I have the quote, the
Yeah,
alchemy quote from Martin Luther.
yeah, yeah. And he also says be a sinner and sin boldly in that same quote. But yeah, the alchemy quote from Table Talk is very important if you have it.
Yeah, I got it right here. It says, but yeah, those two. That's important because you brought this up to me too, and it blew my mind. I'll tell you why it blew my mind. This aspect of it, because this is something you sent me. You said Martin Luther was a correspondent of Johann Reuchlin, who wrote a work called De Arte Kabbalistica. He recommended the study of alchemy in his table talk called Justification by Faith. to Kabbalah, this idea of salvation alone, and Luther saying that reason is a whore and that you can commit sins, fornicate, commit murder, because God does not create salvation for fictitious sinners. That's what you just brought up. Lines up with the idea that reason and faith are separate, just as Aquinas affirmed. So they have to separate reason and faith. That blew my mind earlier today, right? It's like, we, because my understanding as an Orthodox Christian is like, my faith is based on uh, a reasonable approach, because it's not like my faith is illogical, right? You get what I'm saying? So it's not. I don't have to like separate them. I don't think it's that way. Um, so, anyways, as most know, he wanted to take out the Epistle of James. Came up with a dialectic between Paul and James that led to antinomianism and libertarianism. He also signed his correspondence with the Rosicrucian Seal, which is in the Faustian Faces of Modern Science article, and I sourced in two different works. And here's that quote. It says, "The science of alchemy I like well, and indeed, this is the philosophy of the ancients. I like it not only for the profits it brings in melting metals, in decorating, preparing, extracting, and distilling herbs, roots. I like it also for the sake of the allegory and its secret signification, which is exceedingly fine, the touching the resurrection of the dead at the last day. For as in a furnace the fire extracts and separates from a substance the other portions, and carries upward the spirit, the life, the sap, the strength, while the unclean matter, the dregs, that remain at the bottom like a dead and worthless carcass. Even so, at the day of judgment, will separate all things through the fire, the righteous from the ungodly. The Christians and righteous shall ascend upwards into heaven, and there live everlastingly. But the wicked and the ungodly, as the dross and the filth, shall remain in hell, and there be damned." This is a quote from Father Seraphim Rose. I think it's a good play off of what Luther just said, right? He says Luther has taken out of Christianity the idea of struggle, and he's left it something very weak, which does not satisfy either the mind or the heart. Something which could be totally dry and rational on one hand, or totally sentimental on the other hand.
Yeah, here's a letter from Luther to Melanchthon,
Okay.
letter number 99, 1st August 1521. It says, quote, "If the mercy is true, you must therefore bear the true, not an imaginary sin. God does not save those who are only imaginary sinners. Be a sinner and let your sins be strong, and let your trust in Christ be stronger, and rejoice in Christ, who is the victor over sin, death, and the world. We will commit sins while we are here, for this life is not a place where justice resides."
Wow.
And he also said that the epistle of James should be burned because it's a epistle of straw. So
Right.
he wanted to change the Bible.
Yeah, and he wanted to change it because it refuted his doctrine of, faith alone. Right. And which it's not that. See, they try to make this false dialectic that it's like, oh, you preach a works based faith, and it's like, no, your faith should produce good works, right? It's like, if you don't have faith that produces works, then your faith is dead. That's what James says. And he wanted that out because he had this Kabbalistic ideology that you could just state something and change, right? But continue sinning, as you said from the earlier quote, that he could, we don't do like fake sinners around here. Murder and all these things can be justified, and then you can just repent of them, or say that you repent of them just by your word, and not change your actions. But that's not what Christ told people. For instance, think of the Bible where the woman's there about to be stoned because she's caught, an adulteress. She's doing adultery with somebody or something. Uh, she's caught. The Jews want to stone her. Christ says, you know, he who's without sin cast the first stone. He looks at her. They leave. He looks at her and says, you know, um, woman, have they stoned you or something? Or are you still here? I'm paraphrasing, but anyways, he when he leaves, he doesn't just say you're good, bye. He says, go and sin no more, right? So that's the stipulation. It's like repent of this thing, but also don't continue doing it. I think it's almost as if like Luther is saying that you can continue doing these things, and just the words themselves have saved you or something. It's very strange. Uh, this is a quote from him to his letter to Loris Spangler in 1530. He says, such a heart should stand in the middle of a white rose to show the faith gives joy, comfort, and peace. In other words, it places the believer into a white, joyous rose, for this faith does not give peace and joy like the world gives. John 14 and 27. This is why the rose should be white and not red, for white is the color of the spirits and the angels. He's talking about the Rosicrucian symbol, right? And I have what that symbol means here. It says the rose on the cross represents the Sephiroth of the Tephiroth of Kabbalah, which represents Jesus hanging on the cross, made up of the middle pillar, the path of connecting Gabora and Chesed, or Hesed. The five petals rose is associated with the Hebrew letters Yod, He, Shin, Vav, He, which is the Pentagrammaton, Yeshua, the Hebrew spelling of Jesus, by adding a shin, Holy Spirit, to the tetragrammaton, name of God. The Hebrew letters in the petals of the cross, rows of cross of the golden dawn, which I have a picture of that. You can look that up. I might have a link I could send to you. Represents the three distinctions of the Hebrew letters listed in the Sefer Yetzirah, which is the first document in Kabbalistic literature. The three symbols on each arm of that cross are the alchemical symbols of sulfur, mercury, and salt, representing soul, spirit, and body, and are core concepts in alchemy. And the INRI stands for Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews, which is what Pontius Pilate wrote on the cross Jesus was crucified on. And this is a quote from the Golden Dawn, Volume 3, 1939, by Israel Rogardi. He says, quote, the 22 petals of the rose refer to the 22 paths. It is the cause of Tipperoth, that the reticle and the center of the forces of the Sephiroth in the paths. Okay, so I got one more thing I'm probably going to go over and then I'm going to head out. This is Satanism, history, theory, and countermeasures. So it says Satanism is flourishing these days. See what its history, its theory, and its treatments are. 1. The theoretical basis of Satanism. As it is known, the main dogmas of the New Age of Aquarius are, quote, faith in an impersonal, quote, God, and the abolition of distinction between good and evil. The man of the New Age is, quote, God in essence, and otherwise an efflux of, quote, God. Consequently, a search for God outside of man is inconceivable. This self deified and self named man of the, quote, New Age is one who draws up the, quote, ethical law. According to this, quote, law, man can live as he wants, do whatever he wants. Good and evil are two sides of the same coin without any essential difference. On these, quote, principles which characterize every para-religious group of the, quote, New Age, the Theosophy of Helena Blavatsky and her successors in the occult moves. These same, quote, principles in their extreme form are also manifested through the various types of modern Satanism. Indeed, Neo-Satanism also fights beliefs in the one true God, abolishes the distinction between good and evil, and preaches the worship of man himself. Occult, however, is in accordance with the ancient, quote, gospel of the serpent, which urges itself, proclaimed worshipper to worship himself with the criminal doctrines recorded in the Gospel of Satanism. The Book of the Law of Aleister Crowley, quote, man has the right to live according to his own law, to play as he wills, to rest as he wills, to die when he wills, and as he wills, to think what he wills, to say what he wills, to love as he wills, and fulfill your desire for love as you will, whenever you will, wherever you will, and with whomever you will. Quote, man has the right to kill as those who try to take away this right. Slaves must serve. End quote. 2. Historical data. Modern Satanism or Neo-Satanism has its roots in the Middle Ages. The quote, messiah of Neo-Satanism is the English magician Aleister Crowley, 1875 to 1947, who was a key figure in the quote, Order of the Temple of the East, the OTO. He compiled the quote, Book of the Law, according to which man is God, and the essential thing is this quote, God is his will. Many other subsidiary Satanist groups emerged from Crowley's organization. Based on Crowley's organization with the mixing of other satanic quote traditions or trends, the Church of Satan was founded by Anton uh, LaVey on April 30th, 1966 in California. For this reason, this date is the main Satanist holiday. In 1968, LaVey published the Satanic Bible, and in 1972, the quote, Satanic Typology. Although this organization belongs to the so-called rationalistic Satanism, which believes that Satan is not an entity but represents the natural forces of darkness, it is nevertheless the well-organized Satanist group. Like other satanic organizations, it also has its symbol, the inverted occult pentagram, which is sometimes called the Baphomet, as well as the other symbol of Satanists in the form of a goat, which symbolizes Satan. In the 1960s and 70s, various groups emerged from the so-called Luciferianism. It honors and worships Satan, who it calls an unjust God. However, it does not accept that Satan represents evil, but he plays the positive role. That is, you got something to say?
No. I'm just
Okay.
moving around here.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So
Yeah, no worries.
it says that it regurgitates the quote dogma of the New Age that places good and evil on the same level, and it gives them equal value. This satanic group is based mainly on the concept of Helena Blavatsky, the quote criminal doctrine. It has now become clear that Neo Satanism is not simply a quote another faith, albeit a perverted one. If it is a quote criminal doctrine, which constitutes a threat not only to its own victims, but also to a society as a whole. Of course, there is no doubt that the greatest evil is the loss of souls and their entrapment in the networks of the quote man killing devil, who quote prowls about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. 1 Peter 5 through 8. Beyond this, however, the negative effects of this criminal doctrine on the personality of young people, in particular, is cataclysmic. The, the quote manipulation of the mind that is applied here, as it is all para-religious groups, sects, leads to terrifying mental states, to a complete alteration of thinking, behavior, and the entire psyche of the victims, to their cutting off from social environment and the past. The antisocial behavior and the hostile attitude towards family and society are manifested through acts of violence, uh, or orgiastic rituals, blood drinking, and even animal and human sacrifice. We read in the Satanic Bible, pages 89 through 90, quote, when a person with their reprehensible behavior practically seeks to be destroyed, it is truly your obligation to subject them to their will. You have every right to destroy them symbolically, and if your curse leads to their actual annihilation, rejoice because you have effectively rid the world of a beast. If your success of happiness bothers someone, you owe them nothing. It was created to be trampled on. If people had to suffer the consequence of their actions, they would think twice. No one disputes that there are cases that are the result of a disturbed personality or frivolously youthful behavior to satisfy curiosity to acquire, supposedly through Satan, power, wealth, or pleasure. However, there is also those cases for which there is no room for doubt about the presence of the murderer. And the question that arises is, were the so-called Satanists of Germany mentally ill, as they advocated wanted to claim, and what is as their advocates wanted to claim, and that is why they joined the perverted groups, or did Satanism itself distort their souls and turn them into criminal elements? This is because it is internationally recognized that there are sects such as Satanism with, quote, criminal doctrines that lead to criminal behavior and criminal acts. This is why the international organizations, such as the European Parliament, are calling for measures to be taken against these groups. The European Parliament resolution speaks of, quote, the criminal activity of certain sects and calls on the members of states of the European Union to take strict measures to combat them, which I think is odd, but okay. The four, hypocritical anxiety. Every time an incident of satanic activity occurs, it becomes the subject of intense contemporary coverage in the media. Officials and experts are called upon to speak about how to deal with the, quote, enemy of society, especially the youth. However, once everything is commented on, often by unauthorized persons, and the event, quote, sells enough, everything is forgotten again, and the only winners are the Satanists themselves, who managed to once again make their existence known, even spreading fear among many for their supposed, quote, supernatural connections with the, quote, Lord of Darkness. Does the discussion and sometimes the creation of panic among the shocked citizens who are watching the events solve the problem? When subsequently, through the same screens, through the same magazines, and the other publications that cry out for the alleged solution to the problem, the position of occultism, neo-Satanism, astrology, magicians, and other, quote, merchants of false hope are presented in a multitude of ways, is not the concern that many express at least hypocritical. When children and young people become familiar with occultism and neo Satanism through card games, video games, children's books, hard rock music, satanic lyrics, thriller films, etc., is it not likely that they will ever want to, quote, test and practice within groups of strange phenomenon how true what they have read or seen it? But there it is, very likely that a, quote, criminal doctrine lurks, a deadly sect of satanic trap for the innocent and naive young soul. So let's not pretend, let's not be arrogant, let's not try to get rid of the responsibilities that we first had towards our children. Is it not only the Satanists who are to blame, or are those who are indifferent to the proper education of our children? Will those who do not hesitate to trade Satanism in order to increase their illegal profits remain unchecked? Is it possible that a satanic doctrine is not just a deadly drug, a, quote, psychoactive drug, or as addictive substance? Treatment. But where should we look for the way to address this threat? The question is often heard, what does the church do? If those who convey information to the public truly wanted to make known to them what the church does in the spiritual and social sphere on a daily basis, then they surely this question would not be asked. And this is because the church possesses and offers all the spiritual weapons to shield the believer from the threat of Satan. Our Orthodox Church is, quote, Christ himself enduring forever. That is why it is the safe ark of salvation of every person. The believer belongs to the Lord Jesus. It's shielded by the grace of the mysteries, and Satan cannot have any power or authority over him. In addition, the church has organized bodies for pastoral addressing problems created in individuals and families by the criminal activity of dangerous para-religious groups. The central body of the church is the field. The Synodal Commission on Heresies deals with a multitude of cases on a daily basis, stands by victims and families of victims, organizes pan-Orthodox conferences, priestly gatherings, speeches, broadcasts, and informs the people of God through uh, circular publications and announcements. However, this is not the only way to deal with the threat. This is because, as we have repeatedly emphasized above, this is a criminal activity. And when there is a crime, when murdering, human sacrifice, and you know, are committed and lives are lost. When young people become criminals and are taken to psychiatric hospitals or lawful property is threatened, the responsibility now belongs to the competent state bodies. This is what the European Parliament is asking for with its resolutions. This is what many of the European Union are doing with the special state commitment, except for Greece. Okay, this is written by New Calendars. So they're talking about, the European Union will handle this or something. And the reality of it is, the EP is fully receiving funding from the Knights Templar. Why am I bringing this up? Because that's a satanic organization, okay? And they're blessing a satanic organization, and I have the documents to prove that. By the way, that's not just a claim. So if anybody wants to challenge me on that listens to this video, I want you to comment on the video and say prove it, and I will drop a link to that. The church has a duty and an obligation to inform and to support and possibly cooperate with the state, and it does so with fanaticism and intolerance. However, a crime is dealt with by law. There are laws of the state to deal with, prosecute and punish crime, and if such laws do not exist for a specific case, then they must be urgently legalized. Legislated. However, this is the responsibility of the state and not the church. We do not hesitate to say that we have fallen dangerously behind, and that's true. Now, I will say that is true to an extent. It's like the reality is the church is in control of the presidents and governments, and uh, you know, are it's up to the state to make some of these choices. And the reality is, we're seeing time and time again, we have an anti-Christian system that often is in support of the ones that are committing the crime rather than the victims in society. I mean, what can the church do about that? Now, at one time, like let's say in a monarchy, the church could go to, let's say, the emperor and get something done. And sure, we could probably talk to our representatives, but anybody can talk to some representative and hopefully get something done. I mean, that's the best we could do, really. Uh, the victory over Satan, the Christian concept of God and man, of the world, and of salvation, the essential connection between the Christian faith and our daily life will offer young people the necessary self awareness of the Christian, will cover them spiritually, and will prevent their inner search into which they are driven by various existential voids. Satan is a fallen angel, a defeated enemy. Jesus Christ, the mighty and true God, defeated Satan and is the Lord of history, the Lord of heaven and of earth. He who has authority, quote, over clean spirits, he himself assured his disciples of this, quote, they saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Or he saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. That's Luke 10 and 18. Satan, without the Lord Jesus' permission, does not have authority over even a herd of many pigs feeding. Christ is for us the strength, the hope, the salvation. The faithful Christian is therefore not afraid of Satan. At most, his eternal enemy of man may become a good opportunity for many by overcoming his temptations and traps to enter paradise more easily. Okay, so that was it on. I think. Do you have anything you want to cover right now?
Not really. Yeah, that was a bomb drop. Yeah, I really appreciated that. A
Yeah,
lot of information there,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and one of the most important shows tonight, most likely.
I know. I mean, not to be like I know. What am I talking about? I know.
Yeah, I mean,
I know
I
how
mean, we
important
know
one.
because I definitely know because I've seen what's out there.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah, man. So yeah, this is one of the top shows on the internet tonight.
Well,
And
usually you
most
take
likely
that
for like
place, man. I'm not just saying that. You really do. So, well, I mean, you're helping me take the place right now.
well the last month, there's nothing been this substantial released. So for the people that are watching this out there, definitely, take notes, look up the references and the materials, and yeah.
I was gonna end, but I realized, and I was thinking about this when I was doing this. Right, I have this last thing on theosophy. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. I'm gonna read this thing on theosophy. It's the last thing I have on the topic, and it'd be
Yeah,
stupid
I'm
if
here.
I
I'm
didn't
chilling. Yeah,
cover it. You know.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
because it adds
Interesting.
to everything that's been talked about. You know what I mean? So this is a Theosophy by Father Alexi Young. He says, according to J.K. Ballin, quote, Theosophy or divine wisdom is the apostate child of Spiritism mixed with Buddhism. It is far more complicated and more intricate than Spiritism, and at the same time, its world and life view is more complete and fascinating. The chaos of cults. The founder of Theosophy was Helen Blavatsky, or Blavatsky, known to her followers as Madame Blavatsky, or simply HBP. Born in Russia in 1848, she was the daughter of noble parents and granddaughter of a princess, and through the Dolgorovsky family, a descendant of the 12th century saint Michael of Chernigov. Oh, she was a descendant of a saint. Wow. In her youth, she rejected Orthodox Christianity, in fact, proclaimed, quote, a venomous hatred of Christianity. Throughout her whole life, Marianne Mande, Madame Blavatsky, the woman behind the myth. Although an ex theosophist and Orthodox convert told his writer that Blavatsky died repentant and reconciled to the Russian Church in her last days, this has not been confirmed. In fact, primary research in HPB's career is a daunting, if not almost impossible, task. Marian Mead, a non-theosophist and Madame Scarlett biographer, has written, quote, when HPB was 45, she looked back on 4.5 turbulent decades and observed, one cannot remake one's past, one can only efface it according to one's strength. Actually, she took pains to do both, and given her boundless energy, such efforts at revision were not entirely successful. For the last 15 years of her life, she worked strenuously to recreate herself, erasing what she had regretted having done, inserting new material, continually editing herself into the person she would like to have been. Mead. In this, uh, in this, Blavatsky was like cult founder. There are movements who try to eliminate or gloss over the unsavory aspects of their founder's career. Oh, I see. So they're trying to whitewash her past, in other words. The facts of her life, as documented and reconstructed, show Blavatsky to have been, at the very least, psychologically disturbed, and at times an outright charlatan and fraud. Today, our more, quote, tolerant age, many prefer to see her as a colorful, quote, eccentric, who is also a charismatic forerunner of the modern, quote, feminism and the New Age movement. But from an objective Christian standpoint, however, she was, in all likelihood, possessed by an unclean spirit who often spoke and dictated through her by means of automatic writing. For example, HPV constantly dazzled her disciples and the curious with all sorts of mediumistic techniques and, quote, wonders, materializing letters from, quote, invisible, quote, masters, and apparently even producing these superhuman beings themselves. Telepathic, quote, ticks, voices, sounds, music, and messages all, quote, came through in a way that seemed quite, quote, marvelous to her and her followers and even to the skeptical. In his classic study, Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, the late Hieromonk Seraphim Rose wrote that a medium is, quote, a person with a certain psychic sensitivity which enables him to be a vehicle or means for the manifestation of unseen forces or beings, accompanied by means of certain definitive techniques and psychic states which can be cultivated and brought into use by practice, and which have no relation whatsoever either to sanctity or to the action of God. The mediumistic ability may be acquired either by inheritance or by transference through contact with someone who has left the gift, or has the gift rather, or even through the reading of occult books. Father Seraphim then demonstrates how these same mediumistic, quote, performances have been well known to the Orthodox Church since the time of Christ, and have always been seen as a very dangerous, requiring exorcism and prayer, not admiration. As a young woman, HPV was married twice, later bore at least one illegitimate child, was a chain smoker who also used drugs, and may have been an addict, who used drugs and may have been an addict, traveled widely, always under a cloud of scandal in Europe, North America, and India, and claimed to have been initiated into, quote, higher mysteries in Egypt and Tibet. In America, she worked as a spiritist or medium, and in New York in 1875, she co founded the Theosophical Society with Colonel Henry Alcott, a veteran of the American Civil War. By the time the short 250-pound woman, quote, guru died in London in 1891, the Theosophical lodges existed in major cities of Europe and America. Although the membership of her society has never been large, its impact on the underworld of the occult and today's popular New Age mentality is far beyond dreams and expectations of its founder. Theosophy became quote, fashionable even during her own lifetime, numbering writers such as Yeats, poets and artists, politicians amongst its devotees. HBP's successor was Annie Besant, 1847 to 1933, both the daughter and wife of Anglican clergymen in India. In 1925, she adopted a young Hindu, Krishnamurti, proclaiming him the quote, new Messiah, avatar, or quote, world teacher for this age. In 1931, he disavowed this claim and abandoned theosophy, creating a new international following, which until his death in Rome a few years ago looked upon him as their quote, guru. Blavatsky, quote, saw her vision as sublimely messianic to save the world. Theosophy had been associated with the Christian Gnostics, Hebrew Kabbalists, and the teachings of Jacob Boehme and the Paracelsus, right? That's how you say it, right? Paracelsus. Madame Blavatsky's theosophy was nothing less than an attempt to synthesize Brahmanism, an aspect of Hinduism, Buddhism, and occultism into a new religion. It advocated a universal brotherhood of mankind, wise men of superhuman knowledge who lived in the Himalayas. It was her conviction that these men had trained her and then sent her out into the world with permission to disclose some of the secret knowledge that could light up a pitiless and incomprehensible universe. Mead. Madame Blavatsky was a writer. Some of her works also show evidence of extensive plagiarism. Thus, the primary texts of, quote, scriptures of theosophy are vast Isis unveiled and secret doctrines which show strong Rosicrucian influences. As a young man living in London, Gandhi read Blavatsky's Key to Theosophy, which he said, quote, stimulated in me the desire to read books on Hinduism and disabused me of the notion fostered by Christian missionaries that Hinduism was rife with superstition. Quoted in Mead. At the age of 13, the future Prime Minister of India, Nehru, joined the Theosophical Society and throughout his political career always expressed admiration for its teachings. In brief, for Blavatsky, quote, system is quite complex and intricate. Theosophy, like Christian Science, believes that everything is God and God is all. Therefore, God is universal life, the limitless consciousness, the very source and heart of all that is. Since nothing is outside God and nothing, not even evil, can be separate or cut off from God, it follows that all religions are basically one. New Ageism should be united together to create the fullness of truth. Ecumenism, as it interpreted by Theosophy. Although God is an impersonal it, Theosophy teaches that it is a kind of trinity of powers in God, with a fourth feminine aspect, the Divine Mother, vaguely connected with the Virgin Mary, and represents, quote, wisdom. Theosophists are philosophical evolutionists by means of successive, quote, subraces. Mankind is evolving throughout vast millennia on physical, mental, and spiritual plans. Man is divine, quote, spark or fragment of the Godhead, uh, Kabbalism, evolving through reincarnation, Buddhism, back to his source and origin, God. His destiny is not heaven or hell, but, quote, nirvana, or the bliss of nothingness, Buddhism or Hinduism. The physical body also as both as the etheric double, and the quote astral body, medianism. The second of which can be quote projected in sleep or trance-like states. Each successive subrace makes a unique contribution to evolution through an avatar or quote supreme teacher of the world who takes possession of an already existing human body. Thus, this supreme teacher has possessed the bodies of Buddha in India, Hermes in Egypt, Zoroaster in Persia, Orpheus in Greece, and Christ at the time of his baptism in the Jordan. Shortly, this avatar will appear again in even more, quote, superior form. Krishnamurti, as already mentioned, as thought to be the, quote, one, but later disavowed any such the role. From the Orthodox Christian viewpoint, this is a clear foreshadowing of the Antichrist. With world headquarters on a large estate in the Adyar, India, the Theosophical Society numbers 4,000 worldwide, about 5,500 in the United States, with its center in 60 countries. Theosophists celebrate the anniversary of HPB's death on May 8th as the quote, White Lotus Day. Although numerous elements of theosophy have been assimilated by today's New Age movement, one of the most curious and dangerous offshoots of theosophy is the liberal Catholic Church. Founded after the First World War by theosophists who have broken away from the old Catholic Church of Holland. One of its founders, Charles W. Ledbetter, was co-discoverer with quote with Annie Besant of Krishnamurti, and in fact was in charge of raising and educating the boy. Although this church professes no creeds or doctrines, thus its title, quote, Liberal Catholic Church, is exclusive use of the pre-Vatican II rites and ceremonies of Rome has made it misleading, attractive to innocent and ignorant Catholics and Anglicans. Van Balan warns that many liturgical included, quote, folk might walk in one of these, quote, churches and follow its worship without sensing the serious deviation from the age-old tenets of the Christian church. Its, quote, initiated, however, are usually also members of the local Theosophical Lodge and have studied Ledbetter's book, The Science of the Sacraments, which teaches a blasphemous theosophical gnosis behind every ritual gesture and word of the Roman liturgy. As with Madame Blavatsky, Ledbetter was hounded throughout his life by scandal and charges of immorality. But whereas theosophists, many of whom had been free thinkers, could ignore the heterosexual promiscuity of their founder, they expelled the homosexual Ledbetter from their ranks when it was revealed the advocated, okay, this is crazy what he advocated. That's all I'm going to say. I don't even want to say what he advocated. That's crazy. All right.
Yeah, let's just say it's PDF.
Yeah, okay. Me 459. After 3 years of banishment, you've heard of that, huh? That's crazy.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah,
he might have even carried these out with Krishnamurti himself.
really.
These
Wow.
aspirations, yeah. So
Yeah,
Krishnamurti himself may have been abused as a child.
right. Crazy. Uh, Brought him back into his. After 3 years of banishment, Annie Besant brought him back into her inner circle, bro. As far as we can determine, the liberal Catholic Church is today divided into two subgroups in this country. The United States with 23, quote, centers or parishes. Another smaller offshoot of Theosophy is the Arcane School, founded by Alice Bailey in 1923. In 1918, Bailey joined the Theosophical Society in California and developed strong mediumistic skills and even contact with her renowned psychotherapist Carl Jung, who told her that her, quote, mystical experiences and visitors were simply from her subconscious. Undoubtedly, he would have said the same about Madame Blavatsky. HPB's biographer concludes that Madame suffered from, quote, the multitude of disintegrated personality. It seems fairly clear that she possessed an hysteric personality and throughout her life suffered periodic experiences of dissociation along with definite personality alterations. If Helena had been the ordinary impostor that many labeled her, she might have been busily gone her dishonest way without particular psychic strain, but she created for herself an acute psychological dilemma, a quote self-induced schizophrenia. However, even if we eliminate the evidence of the personality disorder or outright fraud and trickery, we are left to judge the quote fruits of the theosophy and its offspring, a dreary saga of tens of thousands of souls who have been drawn far away from the freedom in Christ into the darkness of unbelief, superstition, immorality, and even bondage with demons, and is especially evident in the unhappy life of HPB. Mead tells us that when Blavatsky was about to be exposed as a fraud, she secretly attended the liturgy at a Russian Orthodox church in Paris, drawn by something she could not explain. There she saw not her, quote, invisible Mahatmas, but something far more unexpected. She had the sensation of standing before my own dear mother, and she reflected on the number of years since her mother had died, and how she had been never recognized her fat daughter now. She would never recognize her fat daughter now. That's crazy that he said that. Afterwards, leaving the church, she laughed and said that she was silly and inconsistent for allowing herself to uncover by the set of a Russian church. Undoubtedly, God had permitted her dead mother to reach out to her daughter, now lost in sin, but Helena rejected this heavenly opportunity. Perhaps most telling of all, from the spiritual standpoint, is the utter lack of simple humility in the lives of Blavatsky and her successor. Quoting Bishop Ignatius Branchaninov, Father Seraphim describes his unmistakable state. Let it be for us final words in this chapter. Bishop Ignatius writes that a certain self confidence and boldness are usually noticeable in people who are in self deception, supposing that they are holy or spiritually progressing. An extraordinary prosperity appears in those afflicted with this deception. They are, as it were, intoxicated with themselves. By their state of self deception, they are steeped in, overflowing with high mindedness and pride. So, wow. So that's the end of the episode. And I appreciate you for coming out, man. You helped me a lot, honestly.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, seeing you up here alone. I mean, I waited a while to see if anybody would click the link, but
No, man, we killed. I honestly think we killed that. Hopefully, people enjoy that. Dude, I didn't even know it was 3 hours. That's how much we got in there, man. That was awesome.
yeah, great stuff. Yeah, I
Perfect.
really enjoyed myself. Yeah,
Yeah, bro. We'll do it again soon. All
yeah,
right,
for
brother.
sure. Yeah, yeah, we'll be back at it. Yeah, blessings, brother.
Later, bro.
Yeah, peace be with you. Yeah.
You too.